Hey guys. So we're gathered here today because we have another lawsuit where cops are upset by how they're being portrayed in a fictional work. So drop some lemon pancakes in the chat. We're going to be talking about a film called The Rip, which was a Netflix movie. It featured Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and it was produced by a production company that they own. And I think this is going to be a time. So let's start with the complaint. We are over in the United States District Court, Southern District of Florida. The plaintiffs are two officers, so Jason Smith and Jonathan Santana. They are suing Falco Pictures LLC and Artist Equity LLC. Here we go, guys. Buckle up. We have plaintiffs Jason Smith and Jonathan Santana, collectively known as plaintiffs, hereby sue defendants Falco Pictures and Artist Equity. In support hereof, plaintiff states as follows. So what is going on here? What are they upset about? Listen to how this starts, guys. My brother sent me this last night. I read the first page and I said, we've got to do this as a chat. Nationwide is not on your side. Recruiting individuals willing to join law enforcement has become increasingly difficult. And one significant contributing factor is the way police officers are portrayed in television and film. Hollywood has long shaped public perceptions of policing, often prioritizing dramatic storytelling over true representation of being in law enforcement. While earlier movies and shows tended to depict hero cops, more recent movies and shows have shifted towards critical portrayals that emphasize corruption, brutality, or law enforcement's institutional flaws. These frequent negative descriptions, especially when reinforced by a movie that starts by saying, inspired by true events, is what sells, but it erodes public trust and legitimacy of the street cops that protect us day in and day out. How are we doing so far, chat? This is starting off with a big picture narrative that, oh no, movies don't just talk about hero cops. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we starting this way? So they say this lawsuit arises from defendants' production and distribution of the motion picture The Rip. They're just going to call it the film moving forward, which is presented as inspired by true events while incorporating distinctive elements of a real law enforcement investigation conducted by plaintiffs and portraying those associated with that investigation as engaging in criminal misconduct. Let's get you guys on the screen. Apart from the fact that a large seizure occurred of money, the events portrayed in the film did not happen. Although the film uses fictionalized names, it unmistakably identifies the Miami-Dade Police Department, now the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, or MDSO, the Miami Lakes Hialeah location, the drug money seizure found in orange buckets hidden in the walls, and a specific investigative team unique to the Miami-Dade Police Department. Since September 2025, with the release and widespread dissemination of the trailer and promotional materials for The Rip, along with the release of the film, third parties have approached plaintiffs asking which character they were and how many buckets they kept. For months, these promotional displays were strategically placed at high-traffic venues reaching millions of people, leaving the public with an impression of corruption and theft by featuring copy such as, and copy just means the writing. If you found 20 million, how much would you rip? In connection with marketing materials touted as inspired by a locally famous, internationally recognized case. Family members and colleagues have also remarked that plaintiffs must have used seized funds to complete personal property improvements, purchase vehicles and vessels, and afford private schooling for their children. Now remember, we have two defendants here, the companies. But what we're complaining about is somebody else commenting to these officers. Their own family, their own colleagues. These reactions and those local political leaders that have come out publicly against this film demonstrate that viewers are associating the Miami-Dade Police Department and plaintiffs with the corrupt portrayals in The Rip. So we're going to go over the parties here. So plaintiff Jason Smith is a resident of Miami-Dade County, Florida. Jonathan Santana is a resident of Miami-Dade County, Florida. Defendants Artist Equity LLC is a California limited liability company having its principal place of business in Los Angeles, California, and founded by the main stars of the movie The Rip, that being Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Damon and Affleck also produced the film at Artist Equity. Defendant Falco Pictures, shout out to the new launch of Nintendo Star Fox, is a Delaware limited liability company having its principal place of business in Los Angeles, California, and served as a production company for the movie The Rip, which was produced in association with Artist Equity. Jurisdiction and venue, and they have an issue here. I'll show you the docket real quick. They've got to refile because they didn't sufficiently plead jurisdiction. What did they make this caption? Was it Smith? Yeah, Smith v. Falco Pictures is how they're shorthanding the caption on this. But let's see. Yeah, there's an order here that plaintiffs Jason Smith and Jonathan Santana have until May 12th, that's tomorrow, to file an amended complaint correcting the foregoing deficiencies by properly alleging the citizenship of defendants Falco Pictures and Artist Equity. So they need to correct that. It's not uncommon that happens, but we'll keep an eye on that. So they're saying that this court here in the Southern District of Florida has subject matter jurisdiction because there's a complete diversity of citizenship between plaintiffs. So we're taking it to a district court rather than a state or local court because people live in different areas between plaintiffs and the defendants, and that the amount in controversy exceeds $75,000 exclusive of interest and costs. So aside from recovering any attorney's fees, they're seeking more than $75,000 in financial damages. Venues proper in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida because a substantial part of the events giving rise to plaintiff's cause of action occurred in this district. The tortious acts complained of herein occurred, were made, and or were published in this district, and defendants filmed portions of the movie in the ports of Miami, participated in ride-alongs with Miami-Dade police personnel as part of the film production. So the police participated in this film, and 2 officers are suing. Okay, anyway. So they participate in ride-alongs with Miami-Dade police personnel as part of the film production, and based the defamatory portrayal on an incident, persons, and events centered in the city of Hialeah, Florida, and the Miami-Dade Police Department, which is located within this district. All conditions precedent to bringing this action have occurred, been satisfied, waived, or excused. General allegations. Defendants produced the movie The Rip and distributed the movie through Netflix to the public as a film inspired by true events, while depicting fabricated criminal misconduct within the Miami-Dade Police Department's Narcotics Bureau. Now, I thought it'd be a good idea if we just check over on Netflix itself. And I'm only seeing this today, so it's possible that they've changed how they're marketing this. But this is currently what I see. They have got The Rip. It says, trust phrase when a team of Miami cops discovers millions in cash inside a rundown stash house, calling everyone and everything into question. I mean, I'm not seeing anything here that says this is a true story. It's a documentary. And if we watch the trailer, you guys tell me if you get the impression that this is meant for entertainment or meant to be a documentary historical telling. So here we go.
From the outside looking in, it seems simple. Seize the cash, count it, and turn it in.
Got Tiana Taylor.
Miami-Dade.
On the inside, it's different.
We had a Crime Stopper tip come in on this address.
All right, so they've got orange buckets, and that's supposed to be like a relic of what really happened. They found millions in these orange buckets.
Shit. There's $1.4 million in this bucket. I bought 14 more of those things. That's a $20 million rip. You gotta be smart right now. You gotta move this money, man.
Stay off the radios, no call outs.
What would you do with this? Just this. Everything.
There you go. There's your logo.
You heard about the inside heist teams.
So we have inspired by true events.
Yeah, cops playing robbers.
Need any help tonight, Lieutenant?
Nope. We didn't get a heads up about this. The longer we stay here, the dicier this shit gets.
Don't trust anyone.
All I know is what we do right now and who we talk to matters. You see that? P-I-G-S.
You have 30 minutes to get out of the house.
Is there anything that you've heard about him?
There's snitches in every division.
Watch your back.
Cover! Bitch! I'm breaking left! I got the roof!
All right, now pay attention to how this part is portrayed, right? Again, this is a cinematic trailer. We're going to learn something that I think is very important compared to how this operation actually went down versus the action we're seeing on screen now.
You want to steal this rib? Just say it out loud.
You a snitch, Mike? This is my crime scene. Let me run it.
They just gonna take the money?
Were you and Captain Velez close?
Tell me what's going on.
First off, back the fuck up.
You're not going anywhere without me. You're not giving orders. I don't trust you right now, and that's a problem.
You should just take whatever money you want and walk away. Before this goes really bad for all of us.
And then they roll some credits here, so they'll say like all the starring actors and... So, on a scale of 0 to 10, if you saw this trailer and you went to see this movie, would you be expecting this to be a true telling of events all the way 10? Or would you be expecting you're watching an entertainment movie? Put that as a 0, and anywhere in between. Like, would you, as a reasonable consumer, would you go in and think that you're reading a news report, a documentary production if you went and saw this? Just let me know what you think. So back to the complaint. That's a little bit about the RIP, which apparently you guys can go watch over on Netflix if you want to watch the whole thing. They say that, it's distributed through Netflix to the public as a film, quote, inspired by true events, while depicting fabricated criminal misconduct within the Miami-Dade Police Department's Narcotics Bureau. The RIP is portrayed as a true story of Police Captain Christopher Castellano of the Miami-Dade Police Department and tells the story of a group of police officers who, during a raid on a hidden cash operation, find their trust broken down as team members suspect each other of trying to steal a large sum of cash. Not only was Captain Christopher Castellano never involved in the real incident the film used as the inspiration for the story, Castellano was not even part of the Narcotics Bureau of the Miami-Dade Police Department when the real incident occurred, did not execute the search warrant, and was not present for the recovery of the concealed currency and contraband. And yet, Castellano's not part of this lawsuit? Official records of the June 29, 2016 investigation, including the search warrant return and related reports, identify plaintiffs as supervising and lead investigating officers and do not identify Captain Christopher Castellano as involved in the investigation. So they're talking about official records, not what the movie does. Upon information and belief, Captain Christopher Castellano was compensated in connection with providing information used as the basis for the film. And yet he's not a defendant here. And not for nothing, but if you're suing for defamation, you're kind of alleging that the person that's saying whatever is defamatory, that it's not a reasonable belief, that they didn't believe that they had good information. But here in your own complaint, you're saying that somebody that worked for this department at some point in time, who would be in a better position to know something and provide information, was providing information for this film. I don't see how this helps your case. Are you snitch? In connection with the promotion of the film, individuals associated with the film, including its writer/developer, Joe Carnahan, and actors such as Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, participated in interviews, podcasts, and other public media appearances in which the underlying events depicted in the film were attributed to Christopher Castellano and his investigation. So they're attributing it to somebody who apparently gave them the information. This is getting worse as we read it, in my opinion. Artist Equity and Falco Pictures and affiliated entities also engaged law enforcement consultants in connection with the development and production of the film. So again, we're stating that they did research with somebody that might have a better information to draw inspiration from. Because again, this is being depicted as inspired by, not a true story. The motion picture The Rip was directed by Joe Carnahan, who, upon information and belief, was involved in the development, production, and promotion of the film. The film replicates distinctive and verifiable elements of the June 29, 2016 seizure conducted by the Miami-Dade Police Department, which was supervised by plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith. So he was a supervisor during this actual seizure. And it was executed by Detective Jonathan Santana, who they're saying is portrayed by Ben Affleck. In public interviews, the actors, including Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, emphasized their efforts to prepare for their roles with authenticity and respect. That might just mean they're learning how to play a detective, or narcotics undercover, or it doesn't mean that they're trying to figure out how to be Jason Smith or Jonathan Santana. These statements reflect that the actors undertook research to understand the underlying events, including the roles of the supervising sergeant and the lead investigating detective. The real June 29, 2016 investigation and seizure. On June 29, 2016, the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, at the time known as Miami-Dade Police Department Narcotics Bureau, executed a search warrant on a home located in Miami Lakes, a city bordering Hialeah and Miami-Dade County. At the time of that investigation, Detective Jonathan Santana was the lead detective assigned to the case, drafted the search warrant affidavit, initiated and effected the arrest affidavit, and participated directly in the investigative actions that led to the discovery of the concealed currency and contraband. Sergeant Jason Smith was the supervisory sergeant who assigned the narcotics investigation, supervised the investigative team, and served as the on-scene supervisor during execution of the search warrant and seizure of the currency. A consent to search of residence was obtained as part of an investigation into a man known as Luis Hernandez Gonzalez, the owner of a gardening supply store that was allegedly being used as part of a marijuana trafficking operation. During the consent to search of the residence, a large amount of U.S. currency was located in plain view in the master closet. Well, obviously the movie's not even matching because the orange bucket is a huge piece of why this is like the iconic seizure, because the officers during the seizure, we can probably find a picture of it. Like when they recovered the contraband, these plaintiffs had a picture with what they seized. And it was the orange buckets. Let's see. Oh, there's so many articles now. Now that this is keyworded, it's harder to find. Let's see. What was I looking at yesterday? All right. So yesterday I was looking at some articles. Let's see if it was this one. Nope. Nope, not that one. Okay, here's the picture with the buckets. So, I don't know who's who, but this is Santana and Smith. So, we'll guess that maybe this one's Smith and this one's Santana, but I don't know. But yeah, you've got these orange buckets. And if we go back to the complaint, what we just watched in the movie, they're saying here it was in plain sight. In the movie, they're tearing down the walls and the buckets are behind the walls. So we're already like, creative licensing is out the window. It's not a true depiction of how this went down. Off that one major detail already. It's clearly dramatized because it's cool to break down a wall and find things. It wouldn't be such a great movie if they walk in a house and, oh, here's everything we're looking for. We're done. So, all right. They say, let's see. They have this plain view of the large amount of currency in the master closet belonging to Luis Gonzalez Hernandez. Let's see. At which point, okay, there is going to be a false wall. At which point a search warrant for the residence was obtained. A currency detection canine was brought into the residence and gave a positive alert for the odor of currency. I didn't know they could do that. An arched nook containing a statue concealed the false wall. Upon entering the attic of the home, the team discovered an orange bucket with bundles of $100 bills and a loaded Tech-9 pistol. A garden rake was found, and when it was moved, it revealed a false wall as the drywall gave way, exposing a hidden room filled with orange buckets. The officers had to use sledgehammers in order to break through the drywall and pull out the buckets. The money was properly secured and transported under escort by the Special Response Team to the Miami-Dade Police Department Property and Evidence section. And they're adding this here because their issue is going to be the idea that they pocketed money, right? So they're adding in here that what truthfully happened in June of 2016 is all the currency, everything we seized, properly made it to evidence collection. Approximately 2 days later, after 3 counts conducted by plaintiffs, so they count the money 3 times. Hopefully it wasn't Officer Newland. The total recorded amount reached $21,970,411 in currency seized, the largest cash seizure in the history of the Miami-Dade Police Department. The film's replication of distinctive true facts. So they're going to argue that they're getting enough right. Here's what they're getting right. The film reproduces specific details of that June 29th investigation, including the location of the rip being in Miami-Dade County, the recovery of over $20 million by the Miami-Dade Police Department, the presence of a cash-sniffing dog alerting as to the presence of money, the presence of an arched nook with a statue on the false wall, orange buckets concealed within a residential wall, the physical breach of the drywall to expose those buckets, currency package in cellophane with marked denominations. Isn't that how like any movie would portray something being packed up, like contraband being packed up? Recovery of a loaded Tech-9 firearm at the scene, and we're spelling it different both ways, at the scene located in one of the buckets. And then the film also places those details in the Miami and Hialeah setting and places them within a Miami-Dade Police Department narcotics context consistent with plaintiff's investigation, specifically the Miami-Dade Police Department narcotics team supervised by Sergeant Jason Smith and led by Detective Jonathan Santana. The rip opens by presenting Miami-Dade Police Department narcotics team as the focus of the story and by framing the narrative as one grounded in truth or truth-inspired events. In the film, defendants depict members of the narcotics team as coming under suspicion for participating in so-called, quote, inside heist teams, namely police officers who rob drug stash houses and steal drug proceeds for their own benefit. And remember, we started this complaint with the big picture narrative that, oh no, movies don't just portray hero cops anymore. All of these entertainment, these shows, these movies, they talk about corrupt cops. Should we really have 2 police officers suing to put a stop to social and cultural commentary, entertainment that plays on these themes? Because this is the root of it. This is why they're getting upset. From the outset, Miami-Dade police officers are presented not as ordinary law enforcement personnel carrying out legitimate duties, but as potential participants in organized criminal conduct under color of law. The film's portrayal and fabricated events, and it's kind of weird that they put this in this section, right? This is still under the replication of distinctive true facts. Why would they leave this in this section? If you're saying it's a distinctive true fact, don't you hurt your own argument? What are they doing? Why did you write this like this? So anyway, we're leaving the true stuff, and now we're going to move into what's portrayed and fabricated. Defendants begin the film with the murder of Captain Jackie Velez, a member of the Miami-Dade Police Department narcotics team, during a nighttime shooting. After Jackie Velez's murder, the film portrays the remaining 5 members of the team as being questioned and scrutinized by federal agents who suspect that her killing may be tied to corruption within the team itself. So is Jackie Velez a real person? Like, did this happen? They're saying it's not, right? So, like, is Jackie a real person, but this event didn't happen? Is Jackie a made-up person? Is this entire thing made up? Like, it's a bit unclear because they're lumping it all together, but I'm going to assume that it's all fiction because it's a movie. The film thereafter centers on Lieutenant Dan Dumars, played by Matt Damon, and Detective Sergeant J.D. Byrne, played by Ben Affleck, as principal members of the narcotics team. So they're not using the names of Smith or Santana. Damon assigns the narcotics investigation, supervises the investigative team, and serves as the on-scene supervisor during the search of the premises and seizure of the currency. Affleck serves as the lead detective assigned to the case, reports to Damon, obtains the consent to search the premises, and participates directly in the investigation actions that led to the discovery of the concealed currency and contraband. Following the scene involving the federal investigation, the film depicts Damon receiving information from an unknown caller concerning a stash house located in Hialeah, Florida. Directly after receiving the tip, Damon goes outside and tells the team, "It's money up in a house in Hialeah. I want to rip it. Don't want to end the week on a goose egg." The team was outside of the police department drinking, smoking, and playing dominoes, while someone in the parking lot was doing donuts in a vehicle. The film then emphasizes financial pressure within the team, and officers immediately ask whether the operation will qualify for overtime, to which Damon responds that it will not, stating, "No, this is extra credit." The film then depicts one officer objecting that, without overtime, the officers are being denied the ability to pay their bills, stating, so they get to just fucking pay their bills and we don't get to fucking pay our bills? In doing so, the film expressly links the officer's participation in the operation to personal financial need. The film then depicts Damon telling different officers different amounts supposedly located at the house. When asked how much money was in the house, Matt Damon's character responds, $250 maybe, prompting another officer to reply, "Oh shit, alright, bet. That's an easy rip. Friday night?" Damon then gives a different figure to another officer, stating the operation is supposed to be $150K. Damon gives inconsistent information to members of the team before the operation begins. When asked whether the local Hialeah police should be involved, Damon responds, "Absolutely not. That entire department's upside down." The scene thereby presents the operation as one the officers intend to carry out without involving the local jurisdiction and outside ordinary law enforcement channels. Following these exchanges, the team is then depicted as arriving at the supposed stash house shortly after they'd been drinking alcohol. The sequence then shows the team obtaining consent to enter the home through deception and lies. Didn't they say that they were drinking, but then they were planning to do this on a different night, on a Friday night? I thought they just said something about Friday, that they're going to do it Friday. All right, we're on line 50. Friday night, question mark. Yeah, so whenever they're drinking, they're talking about planning something for the upcoming Friday. But then here they're saying they drink and then immediately go do this. So maybe they were shown drinking again on a separate scene. That seems like a waste of production, but okay. So I have questions about that. I'm not sure that this is following what the movie is portraying. Anyway, they say the sequence then shows the team obtaining consent to enter the home through deception and lies. Affleck asks the supervising officer, "All right, what do we tell him?" To which Damon responds, "A lie." Rather than entering on the basis of a transparent money seizure, the officers concoct a plan to enter the home by using a narcotics pretext, with Damon instructing the officers to obtain consent and search for dope instead of money. When Affleck asks what happens, if the occupant doesn't sign the consent form because the house actually contains narcotics, Damon responds, "Well, then it's a protective search. We clear the place anyway." The film next shows the officers arriving at the residence in Hialeah with Wilbur. Shout out to Wilbur, the money detection dog. Was that really the dog's name? Or is this a different name? Did they rename the dog? So that way, it wasn't really based on true events? Or is it actually Wilbur in the real story too? Before any lawful basis for entry is established, Wilbur reacts intensely outside the home. In that scene, one officer remarks that he's never seen the dog alert in that manner, and states that the dog appears to be going crazy while peeing on the walls of the house. The dog's just running around peeing. When the officer asks how much money is being held inside, Damon responds, $75,000, an amount which again contradicts previous statements to subordinate officers. Affleck and Damon then make contact with the female occupant of the residence at the door of her home and identify themselves as Miami police officers. After the occupant asks why the officers are at her home, Damon states that they received a Crime Stopper tip, indicating there may be narcotics on the premises, and Affleck adds that such tips are typically pretty reliable and therefore must be followed up. When the occupant asks whether the officers have a warrant, Damon responds that they instead have a consent to search, And when the occupant notes that she can refuse and asks, "Why would you do that?" Damon responds, "Well, you would have to say no first," while a money detection dog is aggressively barking in the background. The officers continue pressuring the occupant to sign the consent form, and Affleck tells her, "Sign the paper and we'll be in and out. We want to go home too." I mean, I've watched body cam where, not all officers do this, but I've watched body cam where people stand there and they keep talking to the person who answers the door, insisting that they sign something after the person says they don't want to speak, they don't want to let them in, they don't agree to this, and then they finally just concede because they're not giving up. So, should movies not be able to portray this? The film further depicts the occupant objecting to what she describes as pushy cop behavior. Affleck responds by telling her that the other officers are the ones she does not want to fuck with. Upon obtaining consent, and that's in quotes, the officers push forward with the operation while the occupant protests their conduct. The officers proceed through the residence and into the attic, where they encounter a nook with a small statue mounted in it. After pulling a cable sticking out from a wall socket, a compartment opens directly behind the statue. The officers break down the wall and uncover a hidden compartment behind the wall in the attic, where they discover more than $20 million in cash stored in orange buckets along with a Tech-9 pistol. Immediately after that discovery, Affleck orders the other officers downstairs and begins collecting their phones. When Affleck asks Damon how much money had been indicated by the tip, Damon gives yet another number, telling him the amount is $300,000. Damon then refuses to, so they can't count. Damon then refuses to notify the major of the full amount of money found in the house and instead states that he is not risking it by calling the major because he and Affleck do not trust the police command structure. Suddenly, one of the officers notices a police vehicle outside approaching the house. In this ominous scene, that was a bit in the trailer, the vehicle is seen approaching in the darkness, and the officers driving ask the narcotics officers why they didn't get a heads up about this. Damon responds that the reason they were not notified is that they belong to the Hialeah Police Department and could not be trusted to keep a secret. After the discovery, so is the Hialeah Police Department going to sue because they're being called not trustworthy by this film? After the discovery of the money, the film depicts the officers remaining inside the residence and around the cash rather than immediately contacting command regarding the full seizure. Two officers, while counting the money, then begin to contemplate the salaries they earn per year for all the work they do and comparing it to what they've seized, with one noting that just this little money right here would make my life so much easier to live. The officers counting in this scene further converse, stating whether the cartel would throw me a little loan, cover my nut. To which the other responds, "It don't hurt to ask, I heard they're pretty cool about loaning money to cops." The film then shows Damon addressing the other officers directly and stating, "But just between us, I think we can make something happen here, all right? I know we're all thinking it, so let's get realistic right now. But I want to get mine, and I know you want to get yours, all right? I want to get paid." In that same sequence, the officers begin counting the cash inside the residence after Damon states they will finish the count, while the full amount remains undisclosed to command. As the officers remain at the house with the cash, the film depicts gunfire erupting in the surrounding residential neighborhood. I think that's when they're running on the roofs in the trailer, placing the officers under attack while they continue attempting to move and control the money. After leaving the house to investigate the gunfire, Damon and Affleck later speak directly with cartel members, who tell them that none of their members had anything to do with the attack, and they have no interest in the money discovered in the house, and that they do not want more dead police officers because the captain, who had already been killed, had hurt their business enough. In that same exchange, Damon and Affleck ask whether the cartel had anything to do with the murder of Captain Velez, and the cartel representative ends the encounter by telling them, "Good luck, detectives. You'll need a lot of it tonight." Back at the residence, is any of this even related to what happened with this real bust? Back at the residence, while the officers are loading bags of money, disputes are do you guys believe that this is supposed to be a true story? If you watch a movie where these guys are running on the rooftops, shooting everything up, and yet suddenly they somehow still keep this whole thing under wraps. No other goody two-shoes, good apple agents, good apple feds, good apple Hialeah or Miami Police Department people find out that people are running on rooftops and shooting, and they're able to just continue their rip. To really believe that this is supposed to have actually happened, you're not a reasonable person. You're not a reasonable person. They say back at the residence, while the officers are loading bags of money. So all this gunfire happens and people are walking around with bags of money and no other law enforcement shows up to see these people moving these bags of money. These other law enforcement moving these bags of money. Disputes arise among the officers about who's in charge and what is being done with the cash. And one officer states, so that's it? You're going to burn us, boss? That's it? You're just going to take the fucking money? At the same time, the residence catches fire. Oh, I want to watch this. Oh my goodness. Wow, okay. So the film depicts the house burning while the officers continue trying to remove bags of money from the scene, with the occupant of the house exclaiming, "And what about my grandmother's house? It's burning." So the occupant's just like hanging out there watching all this happen. She's got nowhere to go. After the money is taken from the house, the film depicts the officers loading it into and leaving the scene in a DEA's official's waiting vehicle. So who gave them this vehicle to use for the production? So we have this complaint, this very complaint that's alleging defamation, telling us that officers, the captain, and all of these people were helping to do ride-alongs and help prepare for this film to make the production better. Whether that means more realistic or more exciting is to be debated. But like, if we're getting these vehicles to use, if we're getting approval to use this, if the captain's giving us information, I just don't see how we get to meeting the elements of defamation. And these are officers, they're peace officers. They're suing for how they're being portrayed in their positions as public peace officers. So it's going to be a higher standard than just a layperson. I couldn't see why it wouldn't be. So anyway, she's asking about the burning house. They leave the scene in a DEA official's waiting vehicle that is parked outside the residence and driving away with him. At this point, the film ties those events back to the earlier murder of Captain Jackie Velez, with officers accusing one another during the transport of having pulled the trigger and having finished her. In the latter portion of the film, it is revealed that certain law enforcement personnel connected to the operation, one of the MPD officers and a DEA agent, were themselves involved in theft and in the murder of Captain Velez. The film further depicts that, so they're not, it seems like the worst, like the idea that you killed a fellow officer, a captain, isn't even being attributed to who the characters that are supposedly playing the plaintiffs. The film further depicts that after the DEA agent responsible for the murder is confronted, he's shot and killed by Affleck at the scene rather than being taken into custody and arrested. During this scene, the DEA agent is shown as being wounded and kneeling on the floor. Affleck, rather than immediately arresting the DEA agent, begins to converse with the DEA agent who had murdered Captain Velez. The scene then depicts what appears to be a hand moving, followed by Affleck shooting the DEA agent in the head. Oh, I wonder if that was like that dramatic ending of the trailer where there was like the shadow of the pistol coming onto the frame. The shooting scene itself includes flashbacks between Affleck firing the pistol and Captain Velez's murder. Uh-oh. All of this suspicion, accusation, and violence culminate in the film revealing that Damon and Affleck were working to uncover the members of the team and federal agency involved in the theft scheme. So they're the heroes! They're the heroes! They're the heroes! What does this mean, chat? What does this mean? If the plaintiffs believe that Damon and Affleck's characters are portrayals of them, and at the end of the movie, those characters are the ones who uncover the theft scheme and figure it all out, aren't they the hero cops? It's the bot says, I saw the movie. I know they were the heroes. This is wild. So, like, is it defamation because you weren't actually hero cops? Is this not true? Were you not the heroes? What are the plaintiffs saying? What are the plaintiffs saying? Oh, hey, everybody tuning in. This one's got me riled up. I mean, I think this is a major First Amendment issue. It's a restriction on artistic portrayals, social commentary, creative storytelling. And apparently, these people have a problem with being portrayed if they really believe that, first of all, you're getting Matt Damon and Ben Affleck to play you. Like, you're not getting, like, you're getting, like, A-list. So you have the two stars that people would go see this movie for playing you because you say that you're these characters, and then they are the heroes. They are the masterminds that figure out this horrible thing. Look, what are we doing? Oh, David Trailer, shout out for the 5, says, just jumped on. Anyone suggest re-releasing the film with Afroman doing the soundtrack? Heck yeah. They really should. They should do something with Afroman. Promote the movie with Afroman. And again, I mean, I don't have a Netflix subscription, so maybe if I did, I would have seen this movie. I'm sure they promote their own movies at the top of like, what's popular now? But I haven't heard about this movie, but now I have because of this. So, I don't know. This lawsuit could give this movie more buzz, put more eyes on it. And of course, my first thought was thinking back to Afroman. So, thank you for the 5. Good to see you, David. Iceman Comet, thank you for the 10, says Kat. I watched this movie. See? Did you think it was a true story through and through? Every piece? Let's see what you say. You say you watched it because you really enjoy Affleck and Damon. Yeah, I'd be honored. You want to have an A-list actor portray me? Super cool. Super cool. And I get to be the good guy in the story? Super cool. It'd be cool to have, like, a villain role, too. I don't know. Villains are necessary roles in movies. Would this movie be fun without bad cops? Would there even be a story here without crime? Like, there would be no story. There'd be no movie. There'd be no entertainment without all these other layers. So you gotta have the villains. But yeah, so... And in no way did I think this was real or may have actually happened this way. This suit is ridiculous. Okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm like, maybe I'm going to read this. And this will be one of the times where the chat's like, no, they crossed the line. And it's just over there assuming everything is a money grab lawsuit. But yeah, I mean... And now we're going to get into the claims, the aftermath, what actually happened with their reputation. So let's see, right? Because they've got to say it actually impacted them. Let's find out what they're saying here. Ghost says it's pretty good, likes the movie. Mike says it's like suing a comedian. What a time, what a time. Don't advertise that FFS. They'll take your account. So we've got publication, identification, and aftermath. The film's use of unique, non-generic details of the June 29th, 2016 investigation, combined with its Miami-Dade setting and portrayal of a narcotics team, creates a reasonable inference that the officers depicted are plaintiffs. So again, they're the heroes. If you're sticking by this, like, if anybody's bothering them in public, why aren't they just saying, did you watch the end of the movie? Since the release and publication of the film and the dissemination of its trailer, plaintiffs have repeatedly been questioned by third parties regarding the characters and events depicted. These interactions demonstrate that individuals have associated plaintiffs with the individuals portrayed in the film. After the release of the trailer, a Miami-Dade County state attorney contacted a plaintiff to ask whether any allegations of theft had ever been made in connection with the case, and further stated that his office would be looking into it. I mean, okay. Wouldn't this be the person to clear your name if nothing was wrong? This demonstrates that an individual in an official capacity directly connected to both the case and the county associated the film with the plaintiffs. Third parties have asked plaintiffs, I want to learn more about this, because it's kind of like, if it's nothing, it's going to go away. And if there's something, then there's a problem here that's beyond what plaintiffs are trying to portray in this lawsuit. Third parties have asked plaintiffs which characters in the film they were and how many buckets they kept. People are walking up like, how many orange buckets do you have? Family members, colleagues, and peers and other entities known to the plaintiffs, but aware of the 2016 case, also remarked that plaintiffs must have used seized funds to build personal property improvements, purchase vehicles and vessels, and afford private schooling for their children. I mean, I don't think there's any reason that we should be trying to stifle the community, people. And they're saying it's people known to the plaintiffs. So this doesn't seem like broader community. This seems like an audience that's already engaged with them. But why shouldn't they be able to question, like, why do you have these really nice houses and vehicles? And how do you have private school for all your kids on a whatever salary you were making? Should we not think it's okay for people to ask that kind of thing? Another Miami-Dade County state attorney phoned a plaintiff to ask if he had any financial gain from the movie release and also stated, "I can't believe you killed another cop." That's in quotes. You know, maybe you should put the name of the state attorney. If I was filing this complaint, I would put the name of the state attorney both of the times. This once again demonstrates that an individual in an official capacity directly connected to both the case and the county associated the film with the plaintiffs. These reactions occurred because the trailer and film are based on and reproduce specific details of the June 29, 2016 investigation supervised by Plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith and executed by Plaintiff Detective Jonathan Santana. The film also places those details in Miami and Hialeah and ties them to Miami-Dade Police Department narcotics team, such that viewers familiar with the underlying events can identify plaintiffs and the members of their team as the officers portrayed in the trailer and film. A listed actor, who also served as a consultant for the film, so we have a consultant. So again, this is someone that's providing information to base something on. It could be, here's our standard operating procedures, or it could be, here's specific information about this June 2016 actual event. We don't know. Just as if they're a consultant. Is the Miami-Dade Police Department officer familiar with the case? Was present in the property room on the day of the seizure and knew which individuals were properly responsible for the operation? So the production is getting information from someone that these plaintiffs are saying had information. Following the film's release, he contacted the plaintiffs on behalf of Joe Carnahan. This complaint is making me more suspicious of these officers than anything I read about the movie. Like, I haven't seen the movie, but the trailer looks like it's like a thriller, an action film. Entertainment, fiction. This complaint is making me question because they keep saying, well, they were getting information from people that were part of the team. And even Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office attorneys, they're suspicious of us. Well, that kind of makes me suspicious, and that has nothing to do with the film. Following the film's release, he contacted the plaintiffs on behalf of Joe Carnahan to apologize for Christopher Cassiano's representation of the story and offered to make it right. Following the film's release. All right? This is important. Following the film's release, it seems like this consultant who had all this information after it's already made and released. So if damage was done, it was based on like representations where we had no doubt. So he ends up contacting the plaintiffs and saying that the person who did the story, Joe Carnahan, he apologizes for Christopher Cassiano's representation of the story and offered to make it right by proposing potential roles and consulting opportunities in a subsequent film. So did this person have the authority to make that kind of offer? Like, I'll get you roles in a subsequent film. But second, this person who consulted and gave information is now alleging the bad information came from Christopher Cassiano, who is who? Someone else who worked at the department. So either way, no matter which entry point we want to follow and take at face value, it seems like the film crew was getting information from somebody with law enforcement. This is a lot. This is a lot. This communication reflects that individuals involved in the film's development were aware of the identities of the officers involved in the underlying investigation. I'm not sure that I agree with that. So because an actor who was a consultant, according to the plaintiffs here, says this, that I can make it right and I can get you potential roles in a future film, that apparently means that the film's development were aware of the identities of the officers. I mean, maybe they were, but I wouldn't say that this would be the reason. If anything, the reason kind of seems like it'd be this guy. Moreover, the mayor of Hialeah, like this is just odd. Moreover, the mayor of Hialeah came out and spoke in protest of the film's release and portrayal of the city of Hialeah and its law enforcement personnel. Okay, well maybe this is what's cueing the public in. If you have a mayor come out and speak out about something, that might put people in a position to go and view this film with the lens that it might be based on something that happened. And this is separate from any promotion by the film company. Because if I saw this, if I hadn't seen this movie yet, and this was like months ago when this was coming out, and the mayor comes out and is complaining, like, oh, this is making our cops look bad. Well, now I'm going to go into it. I'm going to want to watch it to see what he's talking about. And I'm going to feel like there's some truth there because you're hurt by it. You're sensitive to it. So it's not the film's portrayal that's giving me that perception. It's the reaction of a different public official to the film that's setting me up for that perception. So they say plaintiffs demand for retraction and correction. So one of the first things that they want is a retraction, and they want a correction. So on or about December 23rd, 2025, plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith, through counsel, sent defendants a demand letter regarding the defamatory statements and depictions in the RIPS trailer release and other promotional material. Now, there are 2 exhibits attached that are communications, but they don't include this one. This one's not attached as an exhibit. The letter specifically identified which false statements and depictions of fact and false implications were knowingly and recklessly conveyed by Netflix through the dissemination of the RIPS trailer release and its related publications. It further demanded that defendants cease and desist from releasing or otherwise disseminating the motion picture, and that defendants preserve any evidence regarding the creation of the film. Defendants responded on or about January 20th, so like almost a month later, after the release of the film, stating plaintiffs' concerns are unfounded because the film did not expressly name Sergeant Smith, and there was no implication that the plaintiffs engaged in any misconduct in the film. On or about March 5th, 2016, this wasn't included as an exhibit either. I think March is when I see the exhibits. Yeah, so there's 2 exhibits, and the first one we have is this March one. That's the date I remember. And we'll read that. On or about March 5th, 2026, plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith and Sergeant Jonathan Santana, through new counsel. So they get new attorneys. They get new attorneys here. So attorneys, we didn't love this. I wonder what happened to the attorney that got this response. Maybe they just had a lot more work, didn't have the bandwidth. Maybe they were like, oh, maybe this is a weak case. I'm not proceeding any further. I sent the demand letter for you, but that's it. Or cease and desist. On or about March 5th, 2026, these plaintiffs, through new counsel, sent defendants a second formal demand for correction and or retraction of the false portrayals contained in the film, demand letter attached as Exhibit A. So in that demand letter, plaintiffs advised defendants that the June 29th, 2016 seizure that serves as the factual foundation for the film was conducted under the supervision of Sergeant Jason Smith and executed by Detective Jonathan Santana of the Miami-Dade Police Department. In that same demand letter, plaintiffs advised defendants that the film replicated distinctive and verifiable elements of that real investigation. Plaintiffs further advised defendants in the demand letter that the film depicted identifiable members of their investigative team as engaging in fabricated criminal conduct. Plaintiffs demanded a public retraction and correction, the addition of a prominent disclaimer to the film and promotional materials, monetary compensation, cessation of further distribution of the film absent corrective measures, and a preservation and insurance notice, including notice that defendants' conduct was interfering with plaintiffs' ability to pursue documentary and media opportunities based on the true events of the investigation. If this is a fiction story and it's not true, wouldn't there be more opportunity to do like a true story documentary style production? So somehow in 2025 and 2026, when they're sending these demand letters related to the film, they're saying that there were opportunities, or they're just interfering with the ability that wasn't being used if they wanted to start using it to go and pursue documentary and media opportunities. That leads me back to what they said above. Well, an actor and consultant reached out to me and said, "Oh, I'll make this right. I'll get you roles in a future film." This just seems like they're mad that they didn't get a bunch of money, which doesn't help the underlying, like, things that they're saying defamed them. Defendants have refused to comply with plaintiff's demands. Response attached as Exhibit B. All right, so let's read these letters. So there's only 2 that they attached as exhibits here. Let's see. All right, so this is coming from Algo Law Firm out in Coral Gables. Is their name down here? Ignacio Alvarez is the new counsel, because the old counsel, something happened. They're not here anymore. And this is to Falco Pictures and Dylan West, who's the registered agent for Artist Equity, the other company. And this is in reply, because this is part of the original thread, demand for correction and or retraction of defamatory statements in Netflix movie Picture the Rip. Dear Ms. Walker, our firm represents Sergeant Jason Smith and Sergeant Jonathan Santana of the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. The June 29, 2016 seizure that serves as the factual foundation for the motion picture The Rip, the film, was conducted under the supervision of Sergeant Jason Smith and executed by Detective Jonathan Santana. Jonathan Santana was serving as the detective and was the lead detective assigned to the case. He drafted the search warrants, initiated and effected the arrest affidavit, and played a central role in the investigative actions that led directly to the discovery of the concealed currency and contraband seized during the investigation. Sergeant Jason Smith was the supervisory sergeant who assigned the narcotics investigation, supervised the investigative team, and served as the on-scene supervisor overseeing operations during the execution of the search warrant and seizure of the currency. We are in receipt of your January 20th, 2026 correspondence, which again is not attached as an exhibit, responding to Mr. Smith's initial cease and desist letter. In that letter, you assert that no actionable claim exists because my clients are not expressly named in the film and that there is no implication that they engaged in any misconduct. This letter serves as a response to your letter and as a formal demand for correction and or retraction of the false and defamatory portrayals contained in the film, which depict identifiable members of an MDSO investigative unit, including our clients, as corrupt, criminal, and professionally unethical. Florida law does not require express naming. A claim exists where sufficient identifying detail causes reasonable viewers familiar with the circumstances to understand that the portrayal refers to specific real individuals. That standard is satisfied here. Replication of distinctive and verifiable investigative details. The film does not merely borrow a generalized law enforcement premise. It replicates distinctive and verifiable elements of the June 29, 2016 seizure, supervised by Sergeant Jason Smith and executed by Detective Jonathan Santana, including the orange buckets concealed within a residential wall, the physical breach of the drywall to expose those buckets, the presence of an arched religious statue nook within the residence, currency package in cellophane with marked denominations, reference to $150,000 and $250,000 in connection with package funds, and recovery of a loaded Tech-9 firearm at the scene. So, if this is the only thing that's supposed to be a replication, I mean, none of this relate to a real person, a real officer. So, If they were portraying like 2 or 3 officers by name and real things that happened with them, maybe a reasonable viewer could say, well, these other officers are also realistic portrayals too, because those 2 stories are real officers that really did these things. But that's not the case here. These are not generic crime elements. They are distinctive features of a specific real investigation led and supervised by my clients. The public framing, too. The public framing, promotional statements, and factual misattribution. Although the film uses fictionalized names, it unmistakably identifies the Miami-Dade Police Department, now the MDSO, the Miami Hialeah location, and that's a slash, the drug money seizure found in Home Depot buckets hidden in the walls, and a specific investigative unit. Viewers familiar with the underlying events can, therefore, readily identify the officers portrayed as our clients. Public reporting and promotional materials for the RIP, including but not limited to Time magazine, podcast appearances, and interviews and social media statements involving officers Christopher Castellano. So, Castellano's participating in these statements? Why isn't he a defendant? The director Joe Carnahan, Ben Affleck, and Matt Damon have described the June 29, 2016 investigation as having been led or executed by Officer Christopher Castellano and conducted by his narcotics team. This is false. So wouldn't a person that's familiar with the underlying events know that this is not a true portrayal? It wouldn't be reasonable for this group to think this whole movie was supposed to be a true depiction with things they've never heard before, if this obvious detail is not true. I just don't get it. Like, this makes me question my own sanity. Like, I'm missing something. Official personnel records establish that Officer Christopher Castellano was not assigned to the Narcotics Bureau at the time of the seizure, did not execute the search warrant, and was not present for the recovery of the concealed currency and contraband. Officer Christopher Castellano was compensated in connection with providing the underlying story for the film. Artist Equity and Falco Pictures and affiliated entities relied upon a paid source who lacked personal involvement in the investigation, while publicly presenting the film as inspired by true events. Inspired. The failure to verify the identity of the actual supervisory and executing officers responsible for the operation constitutes, at a minimum, reckless disregard for the truth. So then they're not portraying your clients. You can't have both. You're saying that a reasonable person will think that the identity of these 2 individuals in the movie is your clients, but then you're also saying they failed to verify the actual identity, while trying to argue that, an explicit name doesn't need to be given, but you're saying they have the wrong people in the wrong roles. How is this in your demand letter? Like, did we proofread it? Am I misreading their point? My energy is like up here. Let me take it down. Let me take it down. Because I really get frustrated when I feel like I must be missing something. Because this argument is internally inconsistent. Their position defeats itself. Chloe! Oh my gosh, guys, Chloe Albert's Revenge is here. It's been forever. How are you? How are you? I see the chat saying hey to you. How are you doing? It's been so long. You heard we're talking about bad or butthurt cops today, didn't you? Man. Well, I need a minute. Sabata says they're stupid. Okay. It's not me. Yeah, Sheriff Chuck says you didn't identify them, but I'm suing because of how you portrayed the unidentified people in the movie, and you also identified them wrong. There's 3 things here. Shield and sword. This document itself deserves a sidebar. My gosh. This is crazy. Made of Question says, what's up with these cops thinking people have to like them? The ego man. And apparently, in their complaint, they said that these characters become the heroes in the end. So if it's defamatory, you're saying your clients aren't heroic. It's just so much. It's just so much. Oh my gosh. Well, a lot of us missed you, Chloe. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the 5-2. Should read your chat, right? I'm just excited you're back. Says they would have a stronger case if they sued for not being portrayed by Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. But then they would have had a different vehicle. They wouldn't have had the DEA vehicle outside ready to go. Oh my goodness. What was it? Because it was like a pest inspection or exterminator vehicle. Or is that, I'm thinking Men in Black. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of movies, you guys. I don't watch a lot of movies. So, and the ones I do watch seem to be related in some way to some case or story that we talk about, like this one. So, always good to see Chloe. Moses says the cops are mad they didn't get paid. Yeah, it sure seems like it. Because they highlight here that they had a paid consultant, but you could have just had us, and now you're ruining our opportunities to go and pursue, right? It's not we have other opportunities waiting for us, and now they don't want to make a production because your movie covered all the bases. It's we just lose the opportunity now to pursue something. And I highly disagree. If you can challenge something, if something is wrong, and you actually have the true story, and you have this Netflix production that got people interested in this cool story, if people start hearing like, oh, the true story behind the movie The Rip, people might be more interested in it than they were 2 years ago. Because again, this happened in 2016. So where are your production deals? It's 10 years later. It's almost 10 years later. If people were knocking on your door to do productions about this, you're either going to have a paper trail of you turning it down at every whim, or it wasn't happening. And now there might be interest that there where there wasn't interest previously. Or maybe there wasn't interest because it wasn't a story where people are running on rooftops shooting up a neighborhood. Which seems like pure fiction. So I don't know. They say here, Officer Christopher Cassiano was compensated in connection with providing the underlying story for the film. They failed to investigate all of this stuff. It's, quote, inspired. And they're putting in this quote that it's inspired by true events, which I do not take to mean a true depiction, a documentary. I take that to mean like one thing was really cool and it just started this idea for a screenplay. The public attribution of the investigation to Officer Christopher Cassiano, combined with the film's replication of distinctive details from that seizure and its fabrication of criminal misconduct within the investigative unit, materially increases the risk that viewers associate my clients with the fictional wrongdoing depicted. How? This does not comport with the argument here. Artist Equity LLC and Falco Pictures LLC. And as soon as I started reading, I went back up here. And affiliated entities also engage law enforcement consultants. So we get through this little blurb where Officer Cassiano's wrong about everything, and they made this movie anyway, with disregard for the truth. At minimum, reckless disregard. But then we're also saying, hey, they got more information from even more law enforcement consultants in connection with the development and production of the film. To the extent that Artist Equity and Falco Pictures had access to personnel familiar with Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office procedures and the underlying investigation, yet proceeded to publicly market the film as inspired by true events while depicting fabricated criminal misconduct within the investigative unit, such conduct further supports an inference of reckless disregard for the truth. So we only have an inference. And our support for that is a vague grouping of, well, we know they consulted with people. We're not alleging that these consultants, 12 consultants tried to say, bro, you've got this majorly wrong. We just have 12 consultants The consultants could have given them information that you're saying is untrue. So we have 3. We have fabricated criminal conduct. The film portrays identifiable members of the investigative unit as engaging in criminal and unethical behavior that never occurred and was never alleged. For example, at timestamp 38 minutes 24 seconds, a character states that it would be easier if the officer stole the money, implying contemplation of theft of seized drug proceeds. No such discussion or contemplation occurred. If you had a whole squad there, and it says a character, it doesn't say the characters that are supposed to portray the plaintiff. Couldn't another person that was there maybe have done this? And this is the thing, the specifics are making me question the truthfulness of the sentiment underlying this film. I would never be even trying to think, hey, this is a true portrayal unless we were getting so defensive about it. But it just says a character. So, would Smith and Santana have personal knowledge if this character is supposed to portray like another person that was part of the team that day in 2016? Would they have personal knowledge of everything that person would have said that day or not? And again, I don't believe that the film's trying to portray this as a true thing that actually happened. But I'm saying, if the assertion is that that's the case, how would they know otherwise? How would they know it wasn't actually something that happened? Like, at timestamp 52 minutes and 5 seconds, the supervising character, so this is one of the characters they believe is one of the plaintiffs, reports a grossly understated seizure amount to his superior, implying intentional underreporting and embezzlement. The seizure was accurately documented and processed. But the point of the movie is that the 2 supervising characters, they do all of this to catch other crooked cops. So at the end of the movie, they're not really doing this for the intent of actually embezzling. The intent behind it is to see if somebody else would acquiesce to it and be the one participating in the theft scheme so they can catch that person. But okay, that's how we're representing it here. In this letter from March 5th, at timestamp 1 hour, 34 minutes and 23 seconds, a supervising officer is implied to have murdered another officer, suggesting homicide and concealment within the unit. No such event occurred. So anybody familiar with this June 2016 event would know that this is fictional. The film further depicts alcohol consumption during investigative activity, internal distrust, suggesting corruption, and concealment of misconduct. That's just very general. We're just leaving it at that. These are just 4 examples. Is this an example? It's like, we're not giving these examples. We're just saying. These are just 4 examples within the movie when there has been no public reporting regarding the real investigation ever alleging theft, underreporting, internal corruption, or homicide. So then we have identification and real-world impact. The film falsely depicts our clients and their unit as engaging in serious criminal and professional misconduct, including but not limited to conspiring to steal seized drug money, murdering a supervising officer, communicating directly with cartel members, committing arson in a residential neighborhood, endangering the lives of civilians, repeatedly violating core law enforcement protocols, and executing a federal agent rather than making an arrest. These depictions are materially false. And any reasonable person watching this movie would know that. Apart from the fact that a large seizure occurred, the events portrayed in the film did not happen. Since the release of the film and the dissemination of its trailer, third parties have asked my clients which character they were and how many. So they can't. Why would you put this in your letter? What are they arguing? What are they arguing about Santana and Smith, chat? What are they arguing? What are they arguing? They're saying that it's obvious. If you watch this movie, it's obvious that we're talking about Santana and Smith. That's their argument they're making. But in this letter, People are asking which character they were. Which one is it? Is it an unmistakable, identifiable portrayal of these two plaintiffs? Or are people asking, who were you? So family members have remarked that my clients must have used seized funds to build personal property improvements, purchase vehicles, and afford private schooling for their children. And I'm noticing that between the complaint and this, it's consistent that it's family members that seem to be saying negative things that would go to reputation, right? Like, oh, you have these expensive things or something that would cost a lot of money that, not everybody can afford. But if it's coming from your family members, that makes me think like your family members are already sus about you. And maybe your reputation, the damage to your reputation precedes this film. These reactions and those political leaders that have come out publicly against the film. Did we mention that here in this letter? Or are we just like throwing that in randomly while we're making a conclusion? Because we just grouped it as third parties. We didn't specify in this letter that political leaders are coming out. We did mention the one mayor, right? Was that even part of this? No, we don't mention the mayor. So we're kind of just sprinkling this in here, even though we didn't talk about political leaders anywhere in this letter. These reactions and those political leaders that have come out publicly against the film demonstrate that viewers are associating my clients with the corrupt portrayals in the film. Next, we have public official standard and reckless disregard. So this is because they're officers. The plaintiffs are officers. As sworn law enforcement officers involved in a widely reported narcotic seizures, my clients anticipate that the public official standard may be invoked. Well, at least you're getting one thing right. My clients, therefore, bore a heightened obligation to ensure that fictional criminal conduct was not publicly tied to a real and identifiable investigation without a factual basis. What? Why do your clients bear a heightened obligation? Is that a thing? Their clients have some type of burden here? An obligation? Because all this is making me think of is how the complaint started with some like, oh, nobody wants to be cops anymore because the movies there aren't shows and movies about hero cops anymore. Which when I was talking to this about my brother yesterday, he made a good point. He's like, if you don't like CBS or any of these television networks, every night they have a show that's either like hero cops or hero firefighters, like hero village people. Those shows, hero whatever, still dominate primetime TV. So I disagree with the big picture that there aren't media portrayals of hero cops. But anyway, what is this obligation? What is this obligation that they're talking about? It seems like we're doing this because we have a sense of duty to make sure that there are portrayals of hero cops and not bad cops. That's how I read this, because I don't know of any such obligation. The film replicates distinctive real-world details, publicly attributes the investigation to an individual who did not investigate it, talking about Chris Castellano, and fabricates theft, underreporting, and homicide, unsupported by any historical allegation. At a minimum, this reflects reckless disregard for the truth. It's not meant to... I'm going in circles. You guys already know my thoughts. Defamation per se and by implication. Our clients and their MDSO unit conducted a legitimate investigation, did not engage in criminal activity, and did not violate department protocols. Under Florida law, falsely portraying a law enforcement officer as committing serious crimes or acting incompatibly with the duties of his profession constitutes defamation per se. The film repeatedly accuses The film repeatedly accuses identifiable officers, our clients, of conduct that has subjected them to hatred, contempt, and professional disgrace. But you're saying people are asking which officers they were. Your words. Further, even when isolated elements are loosely inspired by reality, Florida law recognizes defamation by implication when true facts are arranged, juxtaposed, or omitted in a manner that creates a false and defamatory impression. By marketing the film as, quote, inspired by true events at the beginning of the movie. Oh. So, as you go into it, you know it's only inspired. This word is important. The word true might be there, but this is an important word. Inspired by. And blending real-world identifiers with fabricated misconduct. Artist Equity and Falco Pictures and affiliated entities created the false impression that the depicted corruption of MDSO officers has a factual basis. Moreover, Florida law does not require that my clients be named explicitly. A defamation claim lies where the publication contains sufficient descriptive facts, such that those familiar with the circumstances would reasonably understand the depiction to refer to my clients. But if you're saying the depiction is so off the wall, and people can't identify who's who, what characters they are, this doesn't fly. Here, the film's specificity regarding department name, geographic location, investigation details, and seizure amount you just said the seizure amount was all over the place. So how does the seizure amount make the identification clear? My clients were the two of the officers involved in the investigation and are readily identifiable, particularly for viewers familiar with the events. But they're all asking you which ones you were. This gets worse every sentence I read. I agree. I think this is a joke. I feel like I'm getting pranked. Like, my brother's like, well, what about page 6? Is that like, I don't know. I've never read anything from page 6. I had a journalist that I got a good tip on the Jonathan Majors case works for page 6. So I was like, okay, I know of page 6. Like, I don't know this journalist, but I know someone who everybody was saying her tip was unverified and untrue, and then it ended up being true. And she now works for page 6 because she used to work for the Messenger and that got shut down. So I was like, all right, if page 6 is reporting it, even though they're kind of clickbaity sometimes, I feel like this is a real suit. So I looked it up just to make sure, and it's on the docket. Like, we have the actual filings. But my brother thought that this claim, this position, was so ridiculous. He's like, well, maybe this is a joke. like maybe this is a prank. Maybe this is just like one of those satire articles. But it's not. Alas, we are here. So they say their clients are the two of the officers involved in the investigation and are apparently readily identifiable, particularly for viewers familiar with the events, which this just does not make sense. They have preservation and insurance notice. So they're asking here, we're putting you on notice. Artist Equity and Falco Pictures and the affiliated entities are placed on notice to preserve all documents and electronically stored information relating to development, sourcing, script drafts, consultant communications, marketing materials, indemnification agreements, and insurance coverage. We trust that notice has been provided to all applicable errors and omissions insurance carriers whose coverage may be implicated. Then they have a demand and opportunity for resolution. Given the scale of national and international distribution, the gravity of the fabricated criminal allegations depicted, and the continuing publication and promotion of the film, my client's damages are substantial and ongoing. So we have client's demands. 1, issuance of a public retraction and correction clarifying that the film's portrayal of MDSO officers and the investigation is fictional and does not reflect real events or real officers' conduct. 2, add a prominent disclaimer to the film and all promotional materials stating that the characters and misconduct depicted are fictional and not representative of actual MDSO personnel or investigations. As your clients knew or should have known, the film was not inspired by true events. By having MDSO personnel consulting for the movie, we must assume that the primary purpose in producing this movie was for monetary reasons that resulted in our clients to suffer ill will and hostility at work. So the hostility's coming from inside the house. Monetary compensation commensurate with the substantial reputational injury and related emotional harm suffered by my clients. Cessation of further distribution of the film in the absence of appropriate corrective measures. If Artis and Falco and affiliated entities decline to resolve this matter within the next 14 days, my clients will pursue all available remedies in court, including but not limited to actions for defamation per se, defamation by implication, and related claims under Florida law. All communications regarding this matter must be directed exclusively through undersigned counsel. Artis and Falco and affiliated entities, their agents, and representatives are instructed to refrain from contacting my clients directly for any purpose. This has already occurred once, where my client were promised involvement in a future film to make it right. But that wasn't somebody on behalf of Artis and Falco. That was a random person who seems like they might be an officer themselves, because they were someone that was consulted with for the film. So, but they're going to make this, they're going to beef this up and make it sound all scary. We already have proof that you guys admitted something, when it's really just some guy who's promising a subsequent film, who isn't a producer, who isn't a screenwriter, who isn't a director, who isn't one of the A-list actors that also has a production team with skin in the game. It's a random guy. It was a random guy. Continued distribution and promotion of the RIP in its current form further amplifies and compounds the reputational harm described herein. Nothing contained in this letter shall be deemed or construed as a waiver of any rights, claims, or remedies available to my clients under Florida or federal law, all of which are expressly reserved. Sincerely, Ignacio Alvarez. So there is the one, that's like, I guess it's the third letter, because they referenced two, maybe there were more than that, but there are two that they didn't include as an exhibit. And then we have the response. So let's look at the letter in response to what we just read. Let's see. And also, where were we? Attached as Exhibit B. All right, yeah, we're still on track over in the complaint. So this is now Exhibit B that we're going to read. And this is Ballard Spahr. I've heard that law firm a lot, so I think these are probably heavy hitters. I think these are heavy hitters that we're dealing with. The subsequent film's going to be a documentary on this lawsuit. Ah, sweet. Lindsay, you've got the inside intel then. Lindsay says, I started watching this film last night. Did you think it was real? Did you identify these two plaintiffs? And did you think that they were being portrayed? This is the whole time. This is as funny as the hot dog chef in Stefan Diggs' case. That was the time. I'm never going to eat a hot dog the same way without thinking of it with, like, mustard. It was, like, dried up. I'm never going to forget that. My goodness. Yeah. Uniquely Me says, somebody's feelings were hurt and now they want to sue. They must not have watched the full movie. And they want probably a little bit of the money. Sabata says, I love the way you keep stopping in disbelief. I can't help it. And it's weird because I read like a page of the demand letter yesterday, and I read an article about the lawsuit, which really didn't say all that much. It was just like, the articles were like Ben and Matt are being sued and didn't even mention it was production companies. And then I pulled up the complaint and read the first page, and I lost it at the first page. Because it's like, oh, everybody's so mean to cops. We have to stop making movies about cops where they're not heroes. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? So, also, shout out here, Moses says, the phrase inspired by true events was literally born out of true legal battles involving early movies and is used as a legal disclaimer by studios. And, like, to me, that's the cue. Inspired by true events is that there's creative licensing here. What I'm about to see is not going to be, like, camera contemporaneously recording this exactly as it happened when it happened. Like the word inspired is critical. The disclaimer does not say true events. It says inspired by true events. Words matter. Words matter. And yeah, I didn't know that it was a specific phrase that was born out of whatever, but I see it in so many movies, and I've never seen a successful lawsuit where somebody challenged that this wasn't enough of a disclaimer. And you would think that somebody would if this was used and abused. But a reasonable person, I would imagine, and maybe I'm unreasonable, maybe the chat's unreasonable, maybe we are on our own island here, inspired by true events, it seems reasonable to conclude that what I'm about to watch is not going to be a factual recitation. Thank you for the 10. Also, Chloe, thank you for being a member for 20 months. Thank you for coming out of hibernation and still being a member. Always love it. Chloe says, this is like Jafar Jackson, who portrayed his uncle, Michael Jackson, deciding to sue because they stopped the story before he got to be born. And he didn't like that portrayal because he actually exists. And I've seen people, this is a little bit off topic, but people have been pulling like old tweets, and he seems like he's funny and witty and like satirical. And I've heard nothing but good things about his performance and the movie. And the only bad thing I've heard is like people are mad that a family member got cast in the role. I've seen some criticism, but it's like, if people like the movie and he did a good job, by and large, because the sentiments I've seen about the movie are positive, then why does it matter if he's a family member? And might it actually be better for it to be a family member? But, people complain about everything. So, but yeah. The idea that we get one detail wrong, so nobody should go see this movie, pull it down, stop promoting it, it's just a stupid premise. People go to movies to be entertained. Maybe they go to see movies to learn something along the way, but a lot of the way that we learn through movies is the themes that are presented. So if I go see a movie about bad cops, I'm not going to think that everything that's depicted in the movie step by step happened. But if I start having a conversation and say, hey, I saw this movie today where, cops did X, Y, Z. My conversation and commentary is going to be inspired by the movie and what I was just watching, because now it's on my mind. But my conversation is going to be broader. My conversation is going to be like, well, if things like this are happening, maybe they shouldn't be happening. Maybe we should pay more attention to this stuff. Or, you know what, there's actually a case where something like that did sort of happen, except here's how it was different. And we as people can watch something on TV and be able to talk about real world events without thinking that everything we see is some true to life portrayal, every detail. So it's like, I think movies are important. I wish I had time to watch more, because I do think the fictional stories, the dramatic stories, get us excited to talk about issues and, real world or similar stories that happen in the real world, right? I think it's easier to talk about an issue when it's entertaining to watch. Like Karen Reed trial. It gets to be a big deal because we have like evidence being collected in solo cups. And like all those little details help bring more people to pay attention to a real thing. But we still know when we watch productions about Karen Reed things, I've even these like interviews and documentaries about the Karen Reed stuff, people are aware that the individuals that are real people that are really part of this event, what they're saying in these interviews is their opinion and not purely factual retelling of what exactly happened that day. And those are the real people involved in the story. It's just like, comedy is so important. Comedy is so important. And man, I think some of the biggest issues, a comedian speaks on them, or it becomes a meme. It becomes something that you keep hearing about over and over. But those memes spur social discourse. This is tuckering me out. David, thank you for the 5. Says, can you guys help me think of some movies for me to sue for how they portray jazz trumpet players? Are they ever portrayed badly? That SpongeBob episode. Well, they actually do a good job at the end when they do the bubble bowl. But the band practice earlier portions look kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy portrayal of people in a band. But yeah, I think Patrick had a trombone, not a trumpet. because I think they like extended his neck with the trombone lever. But yeah, they ended up being great by the end of the Bubble Bowl, so that's not a good example. Hey, Destin to Be, good to see you. Hope you had a good Mother's Day. Yeah, Destin to Be says Jafar channeled his uncle in that role. Yeah, that's the sentiment I've seen. So when I saw people like, oh, they hired a relative, must be nice. Like, who cares? Who cares? So let's get to this response, guys. I think I need it in my life. So March 9th, 19th, they responded 14 days, because the letter said you have 14 days. And let's see, what was her name? Lita Walker and Elizabeth Sadlin Bernstein. Her name sounds familiar. Has she recently been on something? I just see some random case there representing the Philadelphia Inquirer in some defamation lawsuit. I feel like I know that name, though. I don't know from where. Maybe next time we do a stream on this, because I feel like we'll have to keep following this. I'll remember why her name looks familiar. So here we go. Dear Mr. Alvarez, we are in receipt of your March 5th demand letter on behalf of Sergeant Jason Smith and Sergeant, I'm going to call him Sergeant Peppers, Jonathan Santana regarding the film The Rip. Our firm represents Falco Pictures, an independent production company that is also responding on behalf of Artist Equity. Your letter contends, here we go, what does it contend? That The Rip defames your clients by depicting a story inspired by the Miami-Dade Police Department's seizure of millions of dollars in cash from the Miami Lakes home of a suspected drug dealer in 2016. According to your letter, the real-life investigation, quote, was conducted under the supervision of Sergeant Smith and, quote, executed by Sergeant Santana. You assert that The Rip falsely portrays your clients, quote, as corrupt, criminal, and professionally unethical. At the same time, you assert that the film's creators wrongly gave credit for the investigation to a different officer. Thank you! Captain Christopher Cassiano instead of your clients. Here we go. There we go. This is enough for me to think this is garbage. You assert this on one hand, and at the same time, you're saying something else. So what is it? To prevail in a defamation claim, Sergeant Smith and Sergeant Santana must demonstrate, among other things, that the challenged statements are, quote, reasonably capable of a defamatory interpretation. And we've got several 11th Circuit cases here. So we've got Keller v. Miami Herald. We've got Hallmark Builders versus Gaylord Broad Company. And those are 11th Circuit. They must also show, and of course we're going to get the case that I think anyone who's ever followed a defamation case has heard this case before. They also must show that the challenge statements are of and concerning them. That's New York Times and Co. v. Sullivan from 1964. We've got Thomas v. Jacksonville Television. And then as explained below, these requirements foreclose their claims. So we have a footnote. As you note, your clients are also public officials who must demonstrate that the creators of The Rip acted with actual malice, i.e., with knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. And then we get the Sullivan case again, and then also Smith v. Russell, which is a Florida case. So let's see. While The Rip borrows some of the striking details of the real-life police raid that inspired it, including the orange 5-gallon buckets containing millions of dollars in cash concealed within the wall of a house, the cash-sniffing dog, we got Wilbur, and the painstaking procedure of counting the currency on site. Maybe Chloe was the name of the actual dog, and Wilbur is just the dog they used in the movie. And the painstaking procedure of counting the currency on site, it does not purport to tell the true story of that incident or portray real people, as the disclaimer in the film's credits explains. It says credits. This program is inspired by real events. However, the characters and events depicted have been fictionalized for dramatic purposes, and any similarity to actual persons is purely coincidental and unintentional. So is this at the end of the film? Or, because I think people typically think of credits being at the end of the film, and that's really how I would think of it if you don't give me context. But you have intro credits too. So has anyone that's seen the film, do you know if this disclaimer also was portrayed at the beginning, like as the film's starting off? So, because I mean, Either way, it's disclosed here. It says the characters and events depicted have been fictionalized. And any similarity is coincidental and unintentional. That goes beyond the inspired by true events. Okay, so Moses says it's at the end of the film. So, accordingly, maybe they could move that to the beginning, but still, I think inspired by true events puts the viewer on alert. Accordingly, none of the members of the film's narcotics teams have names matching those of real people. The film's raid takes place in Hialeah instead of, I don't know how to say it, is it Hialeah? Instead of Miami Lakes. The house in the film belongs to a young woman instead of a middle-aged man. And why would they put a woman in that role, right? Because it's more dramatic. Right? It's more dramatic to just have like, oh, I don't know anything that's going on. So they clearly replace a character with a totally different gender, who's younger, probably tiny and helpless, compared to a middle-aged man that actually answered the door in real life. So anyway, they say the house in the film belongs to a young woman instead of a middle-aged man, and the film's plot lines about corrupt law enforcement agents and a murdered police captain are entirely fictional. So none of that stuff happened. There is no detective or Captain Velez. As the Supreme Court has noted, quote, an acknowledgement that the work is so-called docudrama or historical fiction conveys to viewers that not every aspect of the depiction is meant to be taken as fact. And that's coming from Masson v. New Yorker magazine. The First Amendment safeguards the storytellers and artists who take the raw materials of life, including the stories of real individuals, ordinary or extraordinary, and transform them into art. I think this is helpful. They say you take the raw materials of life and transform them. So that's case law that would protect. Hey, here's some orange buckets and a seizure with a lot of money. That's just the raw materials. You can do that. You can transform that into some kind of art. So here, the Rip does not even attempt to portray real people. It simply uses a ripped from the headlines crime as the inspiration for a wholly fictional story. Your letter does not claim that any particular character in the Rip represents Sergeant Smith or Sergeant Santana. Instead, your client's theory seems to be that any wrongdoing depicted in the film by any member of the fictional narcotics team is attributable to them. They are outmatched on this lawyering. They are outmatched on this lawyering just based on these letters. But the law is clear that a defamatory statement about one unidentified member of a group is not of and concerning every member, and that's the standard. That is the standard. It must be of and concerning. And there's case law. The law is clear that a defamatory statement about one unidentified member of a group is not of and concerning every member of the group, unless a high degree of suspicion about the plaintiff is indicated by the particular statement. So this is a restatement of torts. And then let's see. And we might get this as part of the causes of action when we go back to the complaint. And then see also Arcand v. Evening Call Publishing Company. Holding that defamatory statements about one unnamed police officer was not of and concerning all members of the police department. And then, since the alleged statements referred only to someone in a group of 9, they clearly do not refer to some, most, or all of the group. That was another case, Chapman by and through Chapman v. Bird. We got another one holding that a member of a group has no cause of action for a defamatory statement directed to some or less than all of the group when there is nothing to single out the plaintiff. Thus, even if the Rip could reasonably be understood to portray the real-life narcotics team that conducted the Miami Lakes raid, there is no basis to connect the misconduct of individual characters in the film to your clients. Then we have a footnote. It is unclear from your letter whether Sergeant Santana was on the scene of the real-life raid. If not, his connection to the characters in the film is even more attenuated. Furthermore, your letter completely fails to acknowledge the end of the Rip, which reveals that Lieutenant Dane Dumars, played by Matt Damon. So now the complaint acknowledges that, though. Right? So they must not have acknowledged this in the proceeding. We read one of the letters, but there was another communication before that one. We did see in the complaint, though, at the end, they're the heroes and they actually thwart the plot and they find the thief in the department. So here in this letter from March 19th, the defendants are saying, your letter completely fails to acknowledge the end of the rip, which reveals that Lieutenant Dane Dumars, played by Matt Damon, was only pretending to contemplate stealing the money in the stash house as a ruse to discover which member of his team was involved in the murder of Captain Jackie Velez. In assessing the meaning of a statement, a court must view it in context as part of the work as a whole. The work should not be dissected and judged word for word or phrase by phrase. Thus, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to point to Lieutenant Dumars' conduct in the earlier parts of the film, such as his comment that it would be easier to steal the money than follow protocol. Well, maybe they were so upset watching this movie that they walked out before the end. Because they couldn't sit through it. So maybe they didn't see the ending. Maybe they got upset and had to go. So they say, such as his comment that it would be easier to steal the money than follow protocol, and his underreporting of the amount seized in a feigned phone call to his supervisor, as representations of criminal and unethical behavior. Viewed in the context of the film as a whole, it is clear that this behavior is all part of Lieutenant Dumars' successful plan to catch the killer. He's the hero! By the end of the film, no money has been stolen from the stash house, and Lieutenant Dumars is a hero. Thank you. Oh, chat. Thus, to the extent you believe the Lieutenant Dumars character somehow depicts one of your clients, a contention with which we wholly disagree, the depiction is not even defamatory. They are cooking in this letter response. Why did they file this complaint? Why did they continue to file this complaint? And what happened to the first attorney who stepped out, who's no longer part of this picture after the first response? I want to see what the first response said. Because I really wonder if that attorney was just like, I sent your demand letter, your cease and desist, I'm done, I'm out. Won't get me with this one. Similarly, viewing the full context of the scene in which Detective J.D. Byrne, played by Ben Affleck, kills DEA agent Mateo Nix, played by Kyle Chandler, it is obvious that Detective Byrne acts in self-defense. So it means, like, he's not just a cop killer, he kills somebody, but it's justified. He shoots only after Agent Nix begins moving his hands toward his own weapon. That does not imply murder, as your letter contends. Thus, again, to the extent that you have misapprehended... To the extent you've misapprehended the Detective Byrne character to somehow depict one of your clients, the depiction is not defamatory. Likewise, your contention that the rip depicts alcohol consumption during investigative activity misses important context. The Friday! They said they're going to go do a thing on Friday. They're drinking and they're talking about what they're going to go do on another day. Thank you. In the film, members of the narcotics team gather to barbecue and drink beer after their shift is over on a Friday evening. Dumars then tells them a Crime Stoppers tip came in about a stash house and they need to rip it that night. Okay, so it is the same night. One of the team members complains it's a quarter past quitting time and asks whether they will be paid overtime. After this point, the film does not show anyone consuming alcohol until the final scene, when Lieutenant Dumars and Detective Byrne relax on the beach with beers that following morning. Thus, it is clear that the narcotics team was off the clock when the drinking occurred, and the film does not show anyone drinking while on duty or acting drunk or otherwise unable to perform their jobs professionally at the stash house. All right, so it's not a different day. But I guess you could say then if you're drinking and then you go on this mission, maybe they get a point for that over on the plaintiff's side. Oddly, Sergeant Smith and Sergeant Santana also take issue with statements allegedly giving Captain Castellano undue credit for leading or executing the raid. Your letter does not explain how such statements would be of and concerning your clients or damage their reputations in any way. Indeed, given their objections to the portrayal of the narcotics team in the film, any statements deflecting their portrayal to a different person ought to be welcome. Oh man, I love this writing. Exactly. They ought to be welcome. For these reasons, which are not meant to be exhaustive, Falco Pictures and Artist Equity decline to take the steps demanded in your letter. They reserve all rights, including the right to pursue their attorney's fees, putting you on notice, and costs under Florida's anti-SLAPP law, Florida Statute Section 768.295, or any other applicable law if your clients decide to file a lawsuit notwithstanding the weakness of their claims. Finally, Falco Pictures and Artist Equity do not know of any conversation in which one of their employees made a promise to involve your clients in future films. We agree that all communications on this matter going forward shall be among legal counsel. Very truly yours, Lita Walker and Elizabeth Seidlin Bernstein. Well. So let's get back to this complaint. So they tied in Exhibit B here. That's where we left off. That's what we just read. The defendants based their refusal on the fact that the film includes a disclaimer in the end. Defendants also stated that none of the members of the team in the film have names matching real people. The film's raid took place in Hialeah instead of Miami Lakes. The house in the film belongs to a woman instead of a man. And the film's plot lines regarding corrupt law enforcement and a murdered police captain are fictional. The defendants also noted that in the film, Damon was only pretending to contemplate stealing the money in the stash house as a ruse to discover which member of his team was involved in the murder of Captain Jackie Velez. Defendants further alleged that the scene involving the killing of the DEA agent was an obvious act in self-defense. Defendants have continued distributing and promoting the film in its current form, notwithstanding plaintiffs' demand for correction and retraction. The film continues to display, at its outset, approximately 36 seconds into the film, the statement inspired by true events in large block letters. The film includes the following disclaimer only after the conclusion of the film and its credits, so end credits. This program is inspired by real events. However, the characters and events depicted have been fictionalized for dramatic purposes, and any similarity to actual persons is purely coincidental and unintentional. By contrast, the representation that the film is inspired by true events appears prominently at the outset. The placement and presentation of the disclaimer are insufficient to negate the film's earlier factual framing. As a result of this film and the identification of plaintiffs with the officers depicted in the film, the harm to plaintiffs has continued. So let's get into damages. As a direct result of defendants' publication, distribution, and promotion of the RIP and related marketing materials, plaintiffs have suffered substantial harm to their personal and professional reputations. The film and its promotional content imply misconduct, poor judgment, and unethical behavior in connection with a real law enforcement operation. Defendants used distinctive details from the June 29, 2016 Miami Lake seizure, including cash hidden in orange buckets inside a wall, the method of discovery, the presence of a nook with the statue inside the residence, currency packaged in a distinctive manner, and loaded Tech-9 pistol. Those details allowed people familiar with the case to connect plaintiffs to the film's fictional portrayal. After the film's release and promotion, plaintiffs were approached, questioned, and confronted by individuals who linked them to the conduct depicted in the film. These interactions included insinuations that plaintiffs participated in, approved of, or were associated with unlawful conduct. As a result, plaintiffs have suffered damages to their reputations, diminished standing among peers and colleagues, and injury to their credibility in law enforcement and professional circles. Plaintiffs have also suffered economic harm, including lost income, reduced earning capacity, and lost professional opportunities. The plaintiff's professional value depends in substantial part on their credibility, integrity, and recognized experiences in narcotics investigations and major seizure cases. Plaintiffs have also suffered emotional distress. They have experienced anxiety, frustration, humiliation, embarrassment, and mental anguish from repeated questions and assumptions about their conduct and integrity. Defendants' conduct has caused plaintiffs ongoing stress in defending their reputations. It has also strained personal and family relationships and created an emotional burden that continues as long as the film remains available and promoted. Defendants' conduct has interfered with plaintiffs' ability to pursue future opportunities that would otherwise have been available to them. Plaintiffs have specialized knowledge and experience that would qualify them for consulting, advisory, training, and speaking roles. The harm to plaintiffs has been further exacerbated by post-release promotional activities in which the underlying investigation has been publicly attributed to individuals other than plaintiffs, including through interviews, podcasts, and media appearances by defendants and individuals associated with the films. As a result, plaintiffs have not only been associated with the film's false portrayals, but have also been deprived of proper recognition for their roles in the actual investigation. Because of the confusion caused by the film, plaintiffs' credibility as accurate sources of the underlying events has been undermined. Opportunities have been diverted to others, and plaintiffs' ability to benefit from their own professional experience has been materially reduced. Plaintiffs further had the ability and intent to participate in and or develop a documentary or other media project based on the true events of the June 29, 2016 investigation. Defendants' publication and promotion of the film and the resulting public confusion as to the facts of the investigation and the identities of those involved have materially impaired plaintiffs' ability to pursue such opportunities and to present themselves as credible sources of the underlying event. This part, it just doesn't seem logical to me. I think this is made up. I don't think you had opportunities on the table. I want to see documentation about this. And I would imagine if this proceeds, opposing counsel is going to request in discovery, turn over anything relating to opportunities that you had on or before the release of this film. So anyway, they say as a direct and proximate result of the defendant's conduct, plaintiffs have suffered actual damages, including reputational harm, professional harm, emotional duress, lost income, diminishing earning capacity, and loss of future opportunities in amounts to be determined at trial. I'd say the future opportunities go up. Because, like, I'm sure news outlets are trying to ask them for statements and interviews right now. Yeah, they've had 10 years. They've had 10 years. This is a lot. This is a lot, you guys. Hey, Nosy. Yeah. Drastic One says, or maybe it's Drasticone, says, can anyone say Streisand effect? And they could benefit from that Streisand effect. Clear your name. Now I'm sure there'd be more interest in a documentary. If you watch this film and then you saw like the true story behind what inspired this film, I think a lot of people who saw the film would be interested in that if they like that stuff, generally speaking. Usually when someone has like a book that comes out and it's like based on a true story, people like to hear from the individual the book was written about, right? They get to do interviews. They get to be part of some of the post-promotional materials for the fictional book. Like, I feel like the opportunities could spawn because of this, if you want to take part in them. But what do I know? Majin Kazu says, to be frank, I believe Miami-Dade cops have historical corruption based on real events. I didn't need a movie I don't want to watch to come on to that conclusion. Yeah, like I agree. I agree. And I don't think we should be silenced from being able to create expressive works on police corruption because one or two cops, maybe they did nothing wrong, whatever, but one or two cops are upset that it might look bad on them. It's just not how this country works. So thank you for the super. I fully agree. I fully agree. And if anything, I kind of want to watch the movie to see like how action and dramatic the movie is, to see what all the hullabaloo is behind this complaint, right? Like, this complaint's making me want to watch it, and I don't have time to watch a lot of movies. So, like, that's a little bit of the Streisand effect kicking in here. Chloe with the 5 says, wah. It's not like they had a scene that said they like lemon pound cake. What babies. And maybe that's what's missing. Maybe that's what would make it a true and accurate portrayal. Like, shout out to lemon pound cake. They've got the counts here. What are their causes of action? So defamation per se, which means it's just bad on its face. Like, you're alleging something that's obviously bad. Like, if I say something that's untrue, but it's just something like Chloe had a BLT for lunch today, well, I have to show not only is that defamatory and well, why does it hurt somebody's reputation, versus if I say somebody did this criminal activity, by default, that's like a bad thing to accuse somebody of. So they're saying here that plaintiffs reallege and incorporate everything that was above. This is an action against the defendants for defamation per se. At all times material here too, defendants were each aware that plaintiffs had engaged in lawful investigation and seizure on June 29th, 2016, and that Plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith supervised that investigation, and Plaintiff Detective Jonathan Santana executed and participated in the investigative actions that led to the discovery of the concealed currency and contraband. Nevertheless, defendants jointly and intentionally produced, published, distributed, marketed, and promoted the RIP as a film inspired by true events, while using distinctive and verifiable details from that real investigation and portraying identifiable members of plaintiff's narcotics team as corrupt, criminal, and professionally unethical. The RIP was made of and concerning, so here's that language. The RIP was made of and concerning the plaintiffs, so Santana and Smith, and their 2016 investigation and seizure, and depicts plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith, portrayed by actor Matt Damon, and Detective Jonathan Santana, portrayed by actor Ben Affleck. Although plaintiffs are not named in the film, the RIP as a whole contains sufficient facts or references from which the plaintiffs may be determined by the persons watching or who have watched the film. The film replicates the roles that both Sergeant Jason Smith and Detective Jonathan Santana performed in the 2016 investigation and seizure. The average person could reasonably conclude that the film implicates the plaintiffs upon watching the film. Moreover, those who knew the plaintiffs can make out that they are the persons referred to in the film. Family members, colleagues, peers, and other third parties, including a state attorney, is it one or two state attorneys, have identified the plaintiffs as those depicted in the film and made comments regarding this to the plaintiff. We're on line 151. Including a state attorney. Wait, that's later. Let's go to the first reference. After the release of a trailer, a Miami-Dade County state attorney contacted plaintiff to ask whether any allegations of theft had been made. Another Miami-Dade County state attorney phoned a plaintiff. Yeah, so we had two different. And now we say including A. And they asked if. Have identified the plaintiffs as those depicted in the film and made comments regarding this to plaintiffs. Was that how that was alleged? They asked whether any allegations of theft had ever been made in connection with the case and further stated that his office will be looking into it. That's not identifying the plaintiffs. Another said he phoned a plaintiff to ask if he had any financial gain from the movie released. So did you make money because the movie released? And also stated, I can't believe you killed another cop, which sounds like a joke. Which sounds like a joke. Because we heard that the cops that apparently die in this movie, no story like that happened. The names of those cops don't exist. There is no comparable real-life scenario to which the events in the movie can be compared to. So this had to be unjust. There's no other reasonable way to take this line. But he's asking if you made money from the movie. But they're representing that as an identification for this cause of action, saying that a state attorney identified the plaintiff as those depicted in the film and made comments regarding this to the plaintiffs. In the film, defendants state and depict, in substance, that members of the Miami-Dade Police Department narcotics team tied to the real June 29, 2016 seizure, 1. Contemplated and intended to steal seized drug proceeds for personal gain, 2. Perform police operations without involving the local jurisdiction and outside ordinary law enforcement channels, 3. Underreported the amount of money reported in a Crime Stopper tip and concealed the true amount from command, 4. Collected phones, withheld information from superiors, and remained at the residence with cash in furtherance of a theft scheme, 5. Communicated directly with cartel members outside ordinary law enforcement channels, 6. Constantly disregarded the chain of authority in the police department, including the structure within their own team, 7. Participated in or were connected to arson in a residential neighborhood while removing money from the scene, 8. Were involved in the murder of Captain Jackie Velez and in concealing wrongdoing within the team, and 9. Shot and killed a federal agent instead of arresting him. And these things didn't happen. Like, there's just no comparable real-life scenario of these stories. Defendants published the foregoing statements and depictions as inspired by true events without any credible basis or proof that plaintiffs had engaged in theft, underreporting of seized funds, concealment of evidence, coordination with cartel members, arson, murder, or other criminal misconduct. Below are the timestamps of the scenes from the film whereby defendants caused the above described statements and depictions to be made. So they give 3 minutes in. You've got the film depicting the plaintiff's narcotics team being questioned and scrutinized by federal agents who suspect that the killing of a former member of the team was tied to corruption within the team itself. At 16 minutes, the film depicts the members of the plaintiff's narcotic team drinking, smoking, and playing dominoes directly outside the police department. At 16:10, so 10 seconds later, the film depicts the members of the plaintiff's narcotics team objecting to conducting an operation based on lack of overtime and stating that, so they get to just fucking pay their bills and we don't get to fucking pay our bills? At approximately 16:40, 30 seconds after that, The film depicts the supervising officer lying to various members of the team as to the amount of the RIP and giving them inconsistent information. At 17 minutes, the film depicts supervising officer stating, when asked whether local Hialeah police should be involved, absolutely not, that entire department's upside down. At 18:30, the film depicts the officers obtaining consent to enter a home through deception, lies, and coercion, including having a conversation in which one member asks the supervising officer, "All right, what do we tell him?" To which the supervising officer responds, "A lie." At approximately timestamp 30 minutes, 20 seconds, the film depicts the supervising officer refusing to notify his superior as to the full amount of money discovered at the house. At 32:20, the film depicts the officers questioning the integrity of the Hialeah Police Department. At 45 minutes, the film depicts the officers asking hypothetically whether the cartel would loan them part of the seized money. At approximately 49 minutes, the film depicts the supervising officer addressing the other officers directly and stating, "But just between us, I think we can make something happen here, all right? I know we're all thinking it, so let's get realistic right now. But I want to get mine, I know you want to get yours, all right? I want to get paid." At 1 hour, 3 minutes, the film also depicts the officers speaking directly with cartel members and disclaims any possibility that the cartel had any involvement with the police killing. At 1 hour, 5 minutes, 30 seconds, the film depicts the members of the team arguing who's in charge, it's Charles, and what was to be done with the cash, with one officer questioning the supervising officer's intentions and stating, "So that's it? You're going to burn us, boss? That's it? You're just going to take the fucking money?" At approximately 1 hour, 11 minutes, the film further depicts the residence catching fire while officers continue attempting to remove bags of money from the scene, while the occupant exclaims, "And what about my grandmother's house? It's burning." At approximately timestamp 1 hour, 24 minutes, the film ties those events to the earlier murder of Captain Jackie Velez, with officers accusing one another during transport of having pulled the trigger and having finished her, and later reveals that certain law enforcement personnel connected to the operation were involved in theft and in Captain Velez's murder. At approximately 1 hour, 31 minutes, the film further depicts that, after the DEA agent responsible for the murder is confronted, he's shot and killed by Affleck at the scene rather than being taken into custody and arrested, while also including flashbacks to Captain Velez's murder. And we have in the letter, we're leaving out this detail that it's supposed to be in self-defense, which wouldn't be the idea that you're accusing someone of murder. Could be defamation per se, but to depict a portrayal of somebody killing somebody in some type of justified situation would not be per se. In that scene, Affleck is depicted as seeking revenge because the film also depicted that Affleck and Captain Velez were involved in a romantic relationship. So they're contesting that it was a justified shoot. They're saying it was impassioned. The final shooting scene does not plainly or obviously indicate that Affleck was acting in self-defense. It can reasonably be understood as an execution-style retaliatory killing. Moreover, the film... Would a reasonable person think that this was one of the plaintiffs, though? There's no parallel to this story that would make it seem like, oh, this must be a story about Smith, or oh, this must be a story about Santana. Moreover, the film does not end leaving the viewer with a positive impression of the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs are portrayed through the film as suspicious of one another, as concealing misconduct, as discussing whether to keep seized money, and as speaking directly with cartel members outside normal law enforcement channels. The film further depicts officers accusing one another of theft and murder, reveals that law enforcement personnel connected to the operation were involved in theft and in the murder of Captain Jackie Velez, and ends in an atmosphere of suspicion, accusation, and violence rather than honor or vindication. Even if the film ends with the so-called grand reveal, that reveal does not undo the numerous acts of misconduct that the plaintiffs were portrayed as participating in throughout the film. The above described statements and depictions. So I think this looks like we're trying to morph the lawsuit to adjust to the arguments made in the response to our demand letter. The above described statements, and we're not going to back down. We're just going to double down. The above described statements and depictions from the film made or caused to be made by defendants were presented by defendants as assertions of fact that, regarding plaintiffs in their 2016 investigation and seizure of more than $20 million in concealed currency, contemplated theft, directed officers to violate protocol, concealed misconduct, communicated with cartel members, and committed other corrupt and criminal acts and were made with actual malice. The statements and depictions were directed and intended to portray the false narrative as a true story and thereby insinuate that plaintiffs committed, participated in, condoned, or had a propensity to commit criminal acts during the course of their lawful investigation and police seizure. The above described defamatory statements and depictions by defendants are materially false, were made concerning the plaintiffs, were directed at plaintiffs with actual malice, so they've got to tick each of these boxes, were published to a third party, and tend to subject plaintiffs to hatred, distrust, ridicule, contempt, or disgrace because they accuse plaintiffs of crimes and conduct incompatible with the proper exercise of their profession as law enforcement officers. Defendants each knew that their statements and depictions were false or acted in reckless disregard of the truth or falsity of the statements and depictions. Alternatively, defendants each purposely avoided further investigation with the intent to avoid the truth. A, defendants relied on officer, okay, the formatting changes here. Okay. Defendants relied on Officer Christopher Cassiano as the source of underlying story, even though Cassiano was not assigned to the Narcotics Bureau at the time of the seizure, did not execute the search warrant, and was not present for the recovery of the concealed currency or contraband. Defendants also engaged multiple law enforcement consultants in connection with the development and production of the film, including individuals identified in the film's credits who were affiliated with or familiar with the Miami-Dade Police Department in underlying investigation. Upon information and belief, such consultants possessed knowledge of the actual events and were capable of identifying the officers involved in the June 29, 2016 investigation. Notwithstanding that access to knowledgeable sources, defendants proceeded to market and distribute the film as inspired by true events while depicting fabricated criminal misconduct within the Miami-Dade Police Department narcotics team. So it seems like they're walking away from what they were challenged on in the letter a little bit here, where, these people could have pointed out that you had the wrong people. Like they're going to maintain, because they want to pursue this lawsuit and say they have actual damages, they need to double down on the argument that their clients, the two plaintiffs, are in fact unmistakably two of the officers depicted in this film. So they have to step away and have to walk away from this idea that, oh, Cassiano and these other consultants were telling you about the wrong people. You didn't even have the right people. Because you can't argue that while also arguing you're definitively trying to portray our clients. So we see which side they abandon there, because they want to keep the lawsuit going. So defendants knew or recklessly disregarded that the above described statements and depictions were false, and would be understood by the listening audience and viewers as factual assertions about plaintiffs' conduct, integrity, and performance of their official duties. I wonder if a single review of this movie mentions the words Santana or Smith. A single one. Anyone that's ever reviewed this movie, has anybody said, wow, Smith was a bad person. Wow, Santana was a bad person. Or wow, they were heroes in the, whatever it is. Are there any reviews out there that are identifying these officers as characters in this movie? Are these officers in real life? So they say, let's see, the above described statements and depictions were not privileged and were published to audiences internationally as a direct and proximate result of the defendants' above described false, malicious, and defamatory statements and depictions. Plaintiffs have suffered and continue to suffer damages, including reputational harm, professional harm, emotional distress, lost income, diminished earning capacity, and loss of future opportunities. Defendants each had actual knowledge of the wrongfulness of their above described conduct and the high probability that injury or damage to plaintiffs would result, and despite that knowledge, intentionally pursued that course of conduct with actual malice or reckless disregard for the truth, resulting in injury or damage to plaintiffs, and thereby warranting imposition of punitive damages in addition to compensatory and consequential damages. On or about December 23rd, 2025, Plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith, through counsel, sent defendants a demand letter informing the defendants as to the defamatory statements and depictions in the Rips trailer and other promotional material, and demanded that the film not be aired. I want to see that demand letter. I really do. Really want to see that demand letter. Defendants disregarded this and published the film. Thereafter, on or about March 5th, 2026, Plaintiff Sergeant Jason Smith and Santana, through counsel, sent defendants a detailed second formal demand for correction and or retraction of the false portrayals contained in the film. Defendants again failed to heed this notice and refused to correct and or retract their statements and depictions. Well, they contradicted your demands. So wherefore, by reason of the above and foregoing, plaintiffs Jason Smith and Jonathan Santana demand judgment against defendants for compensatory damages. Punitive damages is permitted by applicable law. Attorney's fees is permitted by law. Costs, pre-judgment and post-judgment interest, and such further relief as the court may deem just and proper. So next we have defamation by implication. A lot of this will probably repeat, but the difference is going to be like one can infer rather than it's obviously them and it's defamation per se. So at all times material 2, defendants were each aware that plaintiffs had engaged in a lawful investigation. Nevertheless, defendants jointly and intentionally produced this film, The Rip, while using distinctive and verifiable details from that real investigation and portraying identifiable members of plaintiff's narcotics team as corrupt, criminal, and professionally unethical. They said The Rip was made of and concerning the plaintiffs and their 2016 investigation. The facts of the 2016 investigation, and again, they're stating that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are supposed to be our clients. The facts of the 2016 investigation formed the basis for the storyline of the film. Although plaintiffs are not named in the film, The Rip as a whole contains sufficient facts or references from which the plaintiff may be determined by the persons watching or who have watched the film. So the film replicates that the two roles that the plaintiffs played in the investigation. The average person could reasonably conclude that the film implicates the plaintiffs upon watching the film. Moreover, those who know the plaintiffs can make out that they are the persons referred to in the film. Which is why they're asking, which one are you? Which character are you, right? Family members, colleagues, peers, and other third parties, including a state attorney, have identified the plaintiffs as those depicted in the film and made comments regarding this to the plaintiffs. And then they go through this list of the distinctive facts that are replicated, and then the juxtaposed alongside the defamatory fabrications that we went through already. And let's see. And then the argument here for this cause, they published the foregoing statements and depictions without any credible basis or proof that plaintiffs had engaged in theft, underreporting, concealment, coordination with cartel, arson, murder, or other criminal conduct. They go through the scenes again, the same scenes. And then, let's see. Mad that it doesn't leave with a favorable impression of the plaintiffs, even though they're heroes at the end. Like, maybe I gotta watch it to see what they're saying. But I can't imagine a Ben Affleck and Matt Damon movie where at the end, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are not, like, heroes that save the day. That's, like, the roles they're cast for. So the film further depicts officers accusing one another of theft, reveals that law enforcement personnel connected to the operation were involved in theft and in the murder of Captain Jackie Velez. Who, I don't know, should we just Google her? Like, am I going to find out she's actually a real person? I don't get any news stories when I search Miami Captain Jackie Velez. Everything is just about the Rip and the plot of the Rip, which is what seemed like would be the result I would get when I searched. But I just felt like I needed to double check. I don't think Captain Jackie Velez is a real person at all. I don't think a captain was murdered. So, like, how would a reasonable person familiar with these events watch this and think that this was that? So anyway, even if the film ends with the so-called grand reveal, the reveal does not undo the numerous acts of misconduct that the plaintiffs were portrayed as participating in throughout the film, and they had to add this in because they were called out in that demand letter response. We've got the above described statements and depictions from the film made or caused to be made by the plaintiffs falsely and maliciously imply that plaintiffs, during their 2016 investigation, engaged in all of these crimes, and they were made with actual malice. Let's see. These statements and depictions were directed and intended to portray the false narrative as a true story because the false narrative was more sensational than the truth surrounding the real operation, and thereby imply that plaintiffs committed, participated in, condoned, or had a propensity to commit criminal acts during the course of their lawful investigation and police seizure. Moreover, the above described statements and depictions were juxtaposed alongside true facts. The above described statements and depictions also created defamatory implication that members of the team would consider committing criminal acts or create an inference that one of the members had already committed a criminal act by omitting facts from the real lawful investigation. And now this kind of goes back to the of and concerning. If the implication is that, maybe we've got this inference that one of the members would consider committing a crime or may have already committed a crime. There's case law that just because a portrayal of one member of a group is doing something doesn't mean it's of and concerning somebody like a plaintiff who's not that specific identified member of the group. So, they say the above described defamatory statements and depictions by defendants are materially false, were made concerning the plaintiffs, were directed at plaintiffs with actual malice, were published to a third party, and not really, but the trailer was showing a lot of Tiana Taylor and the ladies. So I'm assuming those, this would change my life. The characters shown portraying the money, they're not Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, who these plaintiffs seem to think that they are. It's the female characters. So even those depictions in the movie, at least from the trailer, I've got to watch the whole thing, it doesn't seem like a reasonable person would even think the person doing that is these depictions of these two officers. But they say it tends to subject plaintiffs to hatred, distrust, ridicule, contempt, or disgrace because they accuse plaintiffs of crimes and conduct incompatible with the proper exercise of their profession as law enforcement officers. Defendants each knew that their statements and depictions were false or acted in reckless disregard of the truth or falsity of the statements and depictions. And then alternatively, they avoided further investigation with the intent to avoid the truth. So they go over that same list that we saw. They rely on Captain Christopher Cassiano. They engage these multiple law enforcement consultants. And then defendants knew or recklessly disregarded that the above described implications were false and would be understood by the listening audience and viewers as factual assertions about plaintiffs' conduct, integrity, and performance of their official duties. The above described statements and depictions by defendants were not privileged and were published to audiences internationally. As a direct and proximate result of the defendants' above described false, malicious, defamatory statements and depictions, plaintiffs have suffered and continue to suffer. Damages including reputational harm, professional harm, emotional distress, lost income, diminished earning capacity, and loss of future opportunities. They say again that defendants had actual knowledge of the wrongfulness of their above described conduct and the high probability that injury or damage to plaintiffs would result, and despite that knowledge, intentionally pursued the course of conduct with actual malice or reckless disregard for the truth, resulting in injury or damage to plaintiffs, and thereby warranting imposition of punitive damages in addition to compensatory and consequential damages. On or about December 23rd, we sent that demand letter, and on the 5th, we sent another demand letter, and defendants did not heed this notice. They refused to correct or retract their statements. So wherefore, they're seeking all the same things for this implication for count 2. Next, we have intentional infliction of emotional distress. We have IIED. It says, in the alternative, plaintiffs reallege everything above. They say that defendants' publication and dissemination of the above described film regarding plaintiffs was so outrageous in character and so extreme in degree as to go beyond all bounds of decency and be regarded as odious and utterly intolerable in a civilized society. This again is that grandstanding statement that, don't make movies where cops aren't portrayed as heroes. And also feel bad specifically for our clients because of that. Defendants' conduct extended beyond the mere publication of a motion picture. Following the release of the film and its promotional materials, plaintiffs were subjected to repeated accusations of criminal conduct, including inquiries from individuals in official law enforcement capacities, questioning whether plaintiffs had engaged in theft or homicide. Plaintiffs were further confronted by members of the public and professional community who believed plaintiffs had committed the acts depicted in the film. Plaintiffs had notified defendants as to the falsity of the film's statements and depictions and the harm being caused to plaintiffs. Despite that notice, defendants recklessly disregarded plaintiffs' demands and continued to publish, distribute, and promote the film without correction or retraction. Defendants, moreover, included identifying material within the film and replicated distinctive and verifiable details of the real investigation in a manner that caused members of the community, including individuals within law enforcement, to identify plaintiffs as the officers portrayed in the film. And this characterization, this argument here, I think has expanded beyond what was argued above. Right? We did have, an attorney said, I didn't know you killed the cop. After asking, did you make any money for that movie? They alleged that that was someone in a capacity where they could prosecute something, saying something. But now here we're kind of expanding, even though we didn't have any examples given of this. It's going beyond what we've talked about earlier. So it seems like we're just trying to make this seem like there's gravitas behind it. So they say, as a direct and proximate result of defendant's conduct, plaintiffs suffered severe emotional distress manifested by repeated public accusations of criminal conduct, damage to their professional credibility within law enforcement circles, and ongoing stress associated with defending their reputations against allegations of corruption and violence, including accusations that plaintiffs were involved in the murder of a fellow officer. This emotional distress is ongoing and is exacerbated each time the film is viewed, promoted, or discussed, and is further compounded by plaintiffs' inability to control or correct the false narratives presented to the public. Defendants had actual knowledge of the wrongfulness of their conduct and the high probability that injury or damage to plaintiffs would result, and despite that knowledge, intentionally pursued that course of conduct, thereby warranting imposition of punitive damages. So wherefore, they want compensatory and punitive damages as permitted, all of the fees, costs, pre-judgment interest, and post-judgment interest, and such other further relief the court deems just and proper. Plaintiff reserves this right to amend this complaint, and they have to because they didn't establish citizenship of the defendants. They have to just state they did XYZ here, or they're domiciled here, or they're subject to Florida laws here, whatever. And they just need to sufficiently state that in the jurisdiction and venue part. So I'm sure we'll see an amended complaint pretty soon. They have to correct that by tomorrow. So we should see a filing updating that. If there's anything besides that that's updated, I'll look for a difference. But if that's the only update, I wouldn't do a live to talk about that. But yeah, so here they are, and they want a jury trial. Please, I want a jury trial too. Give them a jury trial. Give them a jury trial. Ugh, what is this fancy? He's practicing for his Hollywood signature here. Look at this guy. He's ready to have a film. Got the big blue marker. So they signed off here, Jason Smith and Jonathan Santana. And they've got their attorney here, Mr. Alvarez, and Gavin Sinclair. So there we go. We made it through the wilderness, you guys. The S is for sarcastic. Oh, that's great. That's great. Justin Tabee says, go after the Law and Order episodes. Dun dun. Oh my goodness. Jay Money, good to see you. Thanks for being a member 8 months. Love me some Cat and Chat. We love you back. You just missed speaking of Jay Money. We've got what seems to be a big interest in some money lawsuit here. Hope you've been doing well. Good to see you as always. Oh my goodness. My goodness. And let's see. This is what we had with the docket. Right, so I don't think we have anything new today. It's just everybody, all the notice of filings and the fees being paid to file, because you got to pay fees to file stuff. And this is what we just read. So maybe, was there anything interesting in this? All right, this is like 2 pages, but I think it's just going to cite template case law saying hey, you've got to state why you're bringing it to this court. So please amend your complaint by the 12th. So they're saying you invoked the court's diversity jurisdiction and the amount exceeds $75,000. So there's complete diversity. So what do they want? They say plaintiff's jurisdictional allegations are insufficient. While plaintiffs assert the amount in controversy exceeds $75,000, they fail to plead facts that show complete diversity of citizenship. So they identify the entities, so Artist Equity and Falco Pictures, as having a principal place of business in Los Angeles and Delaware. And then for purposes of diversity jurisdiction, the LLC's citizenship is not determined by its state of formation or principal place of business, but by the citizenship of each of its members. So they've got to add in some extra work and context by refiling. It's really not a big deal as long as they do it on time. And then consequently, to sufficiently allege the citizenship of these unincorporated business entities, a party must list the citizenship of all members of the liability company, the LLC. So absent this information, the court cannot evaluate whether complete diversity exists. So, for example, if the companies are elsewhere, but let's say, I don't know if Matt Damon and... Oh, I'm not sharing? There's nothing on the screen? Where did it go? Sorry, guys. That's weird. I was just reading like this little blurb. But yeah, I think the issue would be like if all of the members of this company actually live in Florida, then the court would consider, hey, maybe you could just do this with a Florida court instead of in a U.S. district court. So they order the plaintiffs by May 12th to file an amended complaint correcting the foregoing deficiencies by properly alleging the citizenship of defendants, Falco Pictures, and Artist Equity, and failure to do so will result in dismissal of the action without prejudice and without further notice. And they'd have to refile, and that means they'd pay a bunch of fees. So they'll probably file this on time. I mean, I see that happen all the time. Not a big deal. But I always like to laugh when we get little things wrong. Even great attorneys do it. But yeah, so if I see anything else change, it's just so you guys know that if there's a new filing in this case, a new amended complaint, it might not be anything exciting. It could just be correcting this one deficiency. So unless I see something that's different, I wouldn't do another live for this amended complaint that's supposed to be filed by tomorrow. But if it is different, we'll get together again. So what do you think, guys? All right, let's do a 0 out of 10. Rate the merits of this complaint based on anything you saw that we read today. Of course, if you have knowledge of the movie, you can include that in your ranking as well. I don't. We watched the trailer together, but that's all I really know besides what's written here. But on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 it's like, oh my gosh, this is so great, so meritorious, they're going to succeed. And 0 is like, what are we doing? What is this? Why are we here? So there we go. The vote's not looking good. The vote is not looking good for the plaintiffs here. Disney's given a 1. Disney's given a 1. That's my upper limit, Disney. That's my upper limit. Maybe round up. Oh my goodness. My goodness, you guys. Well, it's great to see we had a lot of faces in here that I haven't seen in a while. So always good to have that happen. Super love seeing you guys. Coming up at 1 o'clock, if you guys are following what's going on with the Fulio 4 trial, the penalty phase is supposed to start today. It's a Florida case, so we have all 4 convicted on Friday of capital offenses, and now we have like a week-long proceeding where both sides are going to make their arguments for or against a death penalty recommendation. And I've never watched a death penalty like full proceeding. I've read about what was presented. I've read appeals about what was presented. But I've never really watched a full penalty phase of a trial live. So that's going to be a first time for me. And again, it's Florida, so they only need 8 out of 12 jurors to put forth a unanimous recommendation. And this jury pool, they deliberated about 6 to 7 hours on Friday before coming back with, guilty verdicts for the attempted murder charges that they were facing. The jury did find on the lesser included of second-degree attempted murder rather than first. So I think that signals they were thinking and not just checking yes to the top line of everything. But it'll be the same jury, and we'll see what they do now that they have this decision on their shoulders. So this is going to redirect over there. I understand that might not be the type of content. I don't like the death penalty. I'm ideologically opposed to it, although I'm interested in the proceedings. But I understand that's not the type of content everybody wants to take in on their day. So if you're getting out of here, it was good to see you. Thank you for tuning in on this wild First Amendment artistic expression case that we'll be following from here on out. I hope more people start talking about it because it's ridiculous. And see you next time at Something You Like. If you want to watch the Julio Fulio 4, this will redirect us over there. And I'm going to get a snack and some ice in my drink and fire us right back up. So I agree. Sad process all around. I think death penalty, unfortunately, can create grief for innocent people, right? Like even the family member, like somebody dies and a person's convicted in that death, and that person's sentenced to death because they killed somebody, I still feel like there's innocent people that might be caused grief because the responsibility of killing yet another person could sit on their shoulders. But that's just me. That's just me. So, yeah, and Shaq says only if it's 100% sure, and I think that's really my bigger problem, right? I think the government gets a lot of things wrong, and maybe not every case. Maybe they do get it right, but that's where my concern lies is, I can't be so sure. So, not so Zen Gens at the beginning, like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. Well, when you catch up to the future, wish you were with us. We were all like, what are we doing? What are we doing? So, with that being said, guys, if you're coming to hang out with us, I'll see you in a few minutes, and I'll give you updates on this case as I see them come in, besides if it's just a little teeny fix for the initial complaint. Thank you, guys. Bye, everyone.